Chapter 2485. At the very least, he did not need to take care of a burden like her. The two of them could enjoy their remaining years, right? She was a cripple, after all. It would take a lot of effort to take care of her. She did not have the conviction to live on and be a burden to them. At the very end, leave them some peace and quiet, right? Lu Jingtian's thoughts ran wild again. She walked to the sofa and opened her mouth, but all she could taste was a hint of fishy sweetness. The words goodbye were stuck in her throat, and she could not say them out loud. Her lips moved as if to say goodbye, but her tears fell at once. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I can't repay you for raising me. Now, I have to say goodbye. If there's an afterlife, I'll definitely repay you. Please don't worry about me or miss me because leaving is the best way for me to be free. She said goodbye silently in her heart. Holding back her tears, she walked to the door, pushed it open, and walked out. The corridor was quiet. She held onto the wall as she walked. Dressed in a snow-white hospital gown, she looked like a lonely ghost at first glance. The lights were dim, and only the nurse's desk was lit. At this moment, the nurses on duty were lying on the desk with their eyes closed. Lu Jingtian walked very slowly to the elevator. She pressed the button for her floor, walked into the elevator with difficulty, and pressed the button for the top floor. The top floor of the hospital was 28 stories high. This hospital had been renovated and looked brand new. The towering floors were like a prison, holding many patients who were either in pain or in pain. She went to the top floor, passed through the fire escape, and walked to the rooftop. The door to the rooftop was not locked. Some of the nurses who lived in the dormitory would bring a change of clothes to the rooftop to dry. She walked up to the rooftop. Then, she walked to the edge of the rooftop and slowly sat down while holding on to the railing. The wind at night was very cold and strong. She could not be exposed to the wind, but now, she was not afraid of anything. She was finally going to be free. Not only did she not feel sad or afraid, but she was also very calm when she saw that she was about to be free. So calm that it was frightening. She even began to imagine that when she jumped down from this rooftop, her body would fall freely, and finally collide with the hard ground. She would probably be smashed to pieces from the height of 28 floors, right? Pain was inevitable. It was inevitable that he would be in a sorry state. What came with this, though, was the fact that she no longer had to face her ugly face and the constant physical and mental torture. Instead, she felt much more at ease. Her lips tugged into a forlorn smile. Looking into the distance, she could just see the neon lights of the city. She recognized that it was a street of bars. If this accident did not happen, she would probably be in those bars and nightclubs at this time, indulging herself in luxury and enjoying a night of debauchery with those unrestrained men and women. Only after losing something would one realize how precious what they once had was. However, at this time, no amount of regret could make up for it. Lu Jingtian sat on the edge of the balcony in silence for a long time. It was only when the wind turned cold and her head hurt that she finally got to her feet. She stood up shakily and straightened her body. With her back facing the edge of the balcony, she did not want to look at the shocking scene below. Instead, she gently leaned back. Mr. Lu. Mr. Lu. Chapter 2486. Lu Busheng was woken up by a few panicked nurses pushing him. He sat up alertly and opened his eyes, only to see a few nurses standing in front of him, looking extremely nervous. The lights in the ward were on, and it was a dazzling white. He squinted his eyes. What's wrong? Bad news, your daughter, the nurses were so flustered that they could not form a complete sentence. However, when he heard the key words, Lu Busheng immediately became alert. He turned his head abruptly to look at the bed, but there was no one on the snow-white bed. Where's my daughter? He jumped up from the sofa in agitation, grabbed one of the nurses, and questioned, where did she go? Before the nurse could speak, an ear-piercing siren pierced through the night sky outside the window. Lu Busheng's bloodshot eyes widened. As if he suddenly realized something, he pushed the crowd aside and rushed out of the door. 2 police cars drove into the inpatient department. Soon, the sirens stopped, and a few policemen got out of the cars. The empty ground of the building was crowded with people. Some were the patients who were hospitalized, some were family members who stayed overnight, and some were the hospital's caregivers and cleaning aunties, as well as nurses and on-duty doctors. Everyone was gathered in one place, bowing their heads, shaking their heads and sighing, as if they were lamenting something heavy. Lu Busheng rushed out of the inpatient building and immediately noticed that the fountain not far away was crowded with people. His entire body trembled as he frowned in disbelief. His eyes quickly turned red and widened as he sucked in a few breaths of cold air in disbelief. The fountain was some distance away from the entrance. Lu Busheng did not know how he managed to walk this distance. He only knew that he walked over in a daze. He heard the onlookers shaking their heads and sighing. Why did this little girl take things so hard? She probably jumped from the rooftop. The wind is strong at night and blew her here. Sigh, she's still so young. What a pity. Lu Busheng immediately pushed the crowd aside. Excuse me. Let me see my daughter. Let me see my daughter. When the crowd heard that the father of the deceased was here, they immediately made a path for him silently. However, there were still many kind-hearted people who said quietly, "Sir, please restrain your grief and accept this." Lu Busheng pushed through the crowd and rushed in. He immediately saw the pool of blood on the ground that was surrounded by the crowd. Falling from a high place, he died miserably. One of his legs was broken, and his flesh was badly mangled. It was too horrible to look at. Lu Busheng suffered a great visual impact. He felt that he couldn't connect his breath and almost fell to the ground. The police quickly walked over to protect the scene. Then, they heard a man's desperate and sorrowful cry from the crowd, "Tian Tian." The next day, news of Lu Jingtian's death by jumping off a building spread like wildfire. Lu Busheng was unable to bear the pain of losing his daughter. He suddenly suffered a myocardial infarction and was sent to the emergency room. Mama Lu, who had rushed over upon hearing the news, also fell ill when she learned that her beloved daughter had jumped to her death. The couple was sent to the emergency room at the same time. Chapter 2487. Despite Huan Yu's official efforts to keep the news under wraps, there were still some astute reporters who caught wind of it. They waited at the hospital and soon learned of the matter, which they quickly released. Rookie actress Lu Jingtian met with an accident. Unable to bear the burden during her recovery, she jumped to her death from the rooftop. Lu Jingtian is Lu Busheng's beloved daughter. Rumor has it that Lu Busheng suffered a myocardial infarction due to the pain of losing his daughter. After emergency treatment, his life is no longer in danger. Lu Jingtian, disfigured by fire, jumped from the rooftop in utter despair. Her young life has ended just like that. A look at the top 10 female actresses who have died in showbiz. Another storm was stirred up on Weibo. When the public learned of this news, their curiosity was instantly aroused, and they sighed. The entertainment industry had always been transparent to the public. The more popular an artist was, the more difficult it was for him or her to ensure that his or her personal life was free of interference. Some time ago, news of Lu Jingtian's disfigurement due to a fire was still trending on Weibo's trending page. Even though she had not debuted for long and did not have many works to her name, she did play a supporting role in The Green Apple some time ago and gained some fame, but it did not bring her considerable popularity. However, the public's concern for a celebrity's disfigurement was beyond imagination. Now, not long after, there was news of her suicide. The netizens were in an uproar. They could not wait to hear the news firsthand. How did Lu Jingtian commit suicide? Why did Lu Jingtian commit suicide? The tragic scene of Lu Jingtian jumping off a building? Painful reflections on Lu Jingtian's death. Is Lu Jingtian really dead? Or is it a publicity stunt by the company? A female celebrity seems to have committed suicide by jumping off a building yesterday. Ah, I know. Isn't it that, Lu Jingtian? My sister is a nurse at that hospital. She was at the scene when the incident happened. I heard that she died a horrible death, even her head was smashed. Oh, God. Why did she commit suicide? I heard that she was disfigured due to an accident. She probably lost the will to live and chose to end her life. How pitiful. Isn't her father very rich, though? If he has money, he can do plastic surgery and skin grafts. There's no need for her to commit suicide, right? Hee hee. It's hard to explain the entertainment industry's affairs in a few words. Who knows? The Lu Jingtian, who played a supporting role in The Green Apple, actually jumped to her death last night. It's too scary. Jumping off a building to death to her death. Why did she commit suicide? Lu Jingtian of the family of Lu Jingtians to death, her parents to, hers to S to death, B. R to her death, I don't understand what these rich people are trying to do. Of Lu, to commit suicide Lu's to, S to be a topic to this, to's to S, to die of her Lu of her Jingtians of her of a A's of her to's to Lu to her to's, to be to death, hers. Most of the netizens were just curious about this incident. Chapter 2488. The next day after Lu Jingtian's death, a few unscrupulous reporters sneaked into the hospital's morgue with their SLR cameras to take photos of her body. Naturally, the hospital had strict security and quickly sent these unscrupulous reporters to the police station. However, even so, these reporters still kept the negatives. After being bailed out, they returned to the media agency and directly opened a sock puppet account. They sold the photos to netizens at high prices on the forum. The netizens bought the photos and directly published them on the internet. Although the website was quickly blocked, the photos quickly spread on the internet. Huanyu's officials were outraged and issued an announcement to accuse these unscrupulous netizens and media outlets. They even threatened to initiate legal proceedings. Lu Jingtian's suicide kept brewing. Many celebrities and famous figures in various industries posted condolences on Weibo. In the basement of the villa, Yun Na turned on the TV. The entertainment channel was broadcasting a follow-up report of Lu Jingtian's suicide. The scene happened to cut to the hospital. Lights flashed, and Lu Busheng and his mother, dressed in plain black, were being supported by people as they walked among the crowd. Lu Busheng appeared steady and reserved, while his wife was heartbroken. She covered her face with a handkerchief. In the close-up, her eyes were red and swollen with tears, and her face was full of pain. Microphones were constantly pushed in front of them. At first, Lu Busheng tried his best to restrain himself. It was obvious that if it weren't for his public image, he would have really wanted to smash the microphones that the reporters pushed in front of him to the ground and stomp on them to vent his anger. He opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "Don't push. Make way, please make way." Several bodyguards surrounded them and pushed the reporters away. The two left the hospital with heavy expressions, got into a car, and sped away. Yun Na quietly picked up a cup of tea and slowly blew on it. Then, she unhurriedly took a sip, appearing nonchalant. Suicide? That was really straightforward. Still, the girl was sensible and obedient enough to end her own life, saving her the trouble of making a trip to the hospital. Lu Jingtian was still alive. She was like a ticking time bomb that could explode at any time. She originally wanted to wait until the time was right for the Missy to be discharged from the hospital before making a plan to make her completely disappear from the world without leaving a trace. She did not care if Lu Jingtian's vocal cords were burned or if she could still speak or if her identity would be exposed. She had no intention of letting her live when she laid her hands on her. But he didn't expect that this bitch's life was so tough. Even such a big fire didn't burn her to death. Therefore, her heart had long been filled with killing intent. However, things had already come to this. Forget it. In any case, the ending would be the same. Since he had committed suicide by jumping off a building, it would save her a lot of worry. Yun Na silently criticized in her heart, yet a satisfied and complacent expression appeared on her face. In fact, she wasn't worried about exposing her whereabouts and identity. It was just that she couldn't expose herself in advance before completing her final mission. To put it bluntly, even if Lu Jingtian did not accuse her and Yun Yeqing did not expose her, she would not be afraid even if she was arrested. She was not afraid of death. She had not been afraid of anything since she had climbed out of hell. Chapter 2489. Lu Jingtian's incident continued to fester. On Weibo, many media outlets wrote articles, either to mourn or express their opinions. In short, the keyword Lu Jingtian's suicide became the hottest news in the entertainment industry. In fact, she was not particularly famous. She was just a little-known celebrity who did not have the opportunity to be exposed to the public. If she had simply committed suicide by jumping off a building, it would not be surprising, and the hype would have died down in 2 days. However, this incident was not simple and was full of doubts. Ever since she was hospitalized, her burn had become a hot topic for the public. With the media's wantonly publicity and investigation, it also whetted the public's curiosity. Although she was just a small-time celebrity, to the public, who had nothing to do, this matter became a topic of discussion. On the internet, many netizens questioned, how did she get burned? Who was the suspicious man in black in the video released by the police? Could it be murder? Was Lu Jingtian disfigured? If it was a vendetta, then was there a conclusion to the investigation? Was the culprit caught? If it was not a vendetta, then was there a hidden danger to the security in the capital? Just as this matter had yet to be fully explained, the news of Lu Jingtian's suicide by jumping off a building quickly swept across the headlines of major media outlets. Lu Jingtian's suicide was confusing from start to finish. Just 2 days after the incident, Huan Yu released a painful obituary to announce the matter. The obituary read, "Our dearest Lu Jingtian committed suicide by jumping off a building on February XX, at the age of 23. Lu Jingtian was a newly popular starlet who debuted with The Green Apple. Due to her outstanding acting skills and innocent looks, she gained a lot of popularity. Just a month ago, however, due to an accident, she was burned in a fire. 85% of her body was burned, causing severe disfigurement and even disability. Since the incident, the company had been paying attention to her recovery. Her family, friends, and fans were also constantly encouraging her, hoping that she would be able to walk out of her grief as soon as possible and actively cooperate with the treatment. Her recovery was ideal. Just a week ago, she successfully passed the critical and infectious stage. Just as everyone was feeling excited, 2 days ago, unfortunate news came. Our beloved Jingtian still could not walk out of the pain of her disfigurement. 2 days ago, at 3 a.m., she jumped off the rooftop of a hospital building and died. What was supposed to be a beautiful season, yet she passed away. We feel sad and sorry for her. At this moment, no matter how much rhetoric and words we use, they are pale and powerless. The dead are gone, and the living. We only wish her a safe journey. Once the obituary was released, many netizens, who were still skeptical about the suicide case. For the past few days, Lu Jingtian's suicide was still the hottest headline, even overtaking Li Xiang, who had been hyped up for a while. And what about Li Xiang, How could he let the matter rest? Naturally, it wouldn't stop there. Chapter 2490. The deceased should always be respected. Despite such a tragedy, Li Xian, was still trying her best to hype things up. Many netizens hated her face. When Li Xian, saw this comment, she coldly mocked, "What else can be considered pure in the entertainment industry? Hate it. Hate it as much as you want. My reputation is already so bad. Since that's the case, I'll focus on creating hype until I become famous." She was indignant, but she also wanted to fight for her dignity. She was determined to become an even more popular celebrity than Yun Shishir. This had become her ambitious goal. Of course, this was all in the future. On the other side, Yun Shishir, together with the 2 lads, and Mu Yaja, boarded a private flight to Norway for the first stop of the wedding photo shoot. On the day of Lu Jingtian's suicide, she happened to be on the plane with her phone switched off. Thus, she was unaware of such an earth-shattering incident in the entertainment industry. Qin Zhou had been busy assisting Ji Lin in dealing with Lu Jingtian's matter. Lu Jingtian's father, a senior executive of Huanyu, was unable to recover from the loss of his beloved daughter and was bedridden. Hence, after this incident, the funeral was handed over to Ji Lin to handle. Everyone in Huanyu was solemn and busy. Qin Zhou did not specifically inform Yun Shishir. After all, her wedding photo shoot was a joyous occasion, and he naturally did not want to dampen her spirits. Hence, he took some time out of his busy schedule to log on to Yun Shishir's Weibo and post his condolences. Of course, this time, he had learned his lesson. In order to prevent the previous blunder from happening again, he specially found a phone of the same model as Yun Shishir's and logged on to Weibo. The netizens did not question him. Yun Shishir was completely unaware of this matter and was still immersed in the joy of happiness. Mu Yaja told her that, in order to pursue perfection, they had specially selected several countries for this wedding photo shoot, such as Paris and Italy, which she yearned for. As a romantic country, Norway was naturally a good choice. The two little munchkins also wanted to go, so Yun Shishir brought the two little guys along. After all, they would be gone for a week, and she was worried about leaving the two little guys alone at home. In Norway he met with Mankey Harding. Mankey followed them throughout the entire wedding photo shoot trip. Mu Yaja had already finalized the schedule with him before this. Their first stop was Trolltunga in Norway. Trolltunga was a magical rock located in the Skjeggedal mountain in Norway. It was also translated as Giant's Tongue in Chinese. The reason why it was called Giant's Tongue was because the rock protruded far out of the cliff like a tongue, so it was called Giant's Tongue. Trolltunga mountain was steep. For the sake of scenery and safety, Mu Yaja used a helicopter to land directly on the mountain. As for Mankey, he climbed up another mountain in the distance to film the scene. On the beautiful Trolltunga, there were extremely stunning silhouettes. A total of 5 shots were taken, but for these 5 shots, the team went through a lot of trouble and put in a lot of effort. At first, when the helicopter landed, Yun Shishir jumped out of the helicopter. However, she was stunned by the spectacular and thrilling scene in front of her. It was too high. It was too steep. Chapter 2491. It was no wonder that this was one of the must-visit attractions for adventure enthusiasts. The rock wasn't big and could only accommodate a few people standing on it. If they wanted to climb up, they had to take the cable car to the mountainside and then climb up a flight of stairs. However, after going through so much effort to climb up the Giant's Tongue, the scenery was indescribable. If they climbed up on their own, they would definitely feel a great sense of accomplishment, right? Yun Shishir thought to herself. However, it would definitely be very dangerous. Mu Yaja said to her, perhaps, in the near future, this spectacular landmark will disappear. Yun Shishir asked curiously, why? Do you know how this Trolltunga was formed? Yun Shishir shook her head. He said slowly, the Trolltunga that is suspended in mid-air is the result of rock weathering. After a long period of wind, sun, and rain, the broken rock has been taken away, leaving only the hard part standing. Perhaps, as time passes, it will also fall off the cliff. The Trolltunga was formed more than 10,000 years ago during the Ice Age. The water flow from the melting glaciers eroded most of the rocks over the years and finally formed such a unique landscape. After the shoot, the group returned to the hotel. Yun Shishir was still immersed in the shock from earlier. The filming location in Norway this time was Mu Yaja's suggestion, so she naturally agreed. Along the way, she was still curious about the unique landscape in Norway. However, when she saw the Trolltunga with her own eyes, Yun Shishir was deeply shocked. After the trip ended, she still wanted to see more. How did you come up with the idea to film the Trolltunga? Yun Shishir couldn't help but ask curiously. I've seen it in a magazine before. Some mountaineering enthusiasts filmed it in a blockbuster. I was shocked, so I thought of it immediately. Mu Yaja paused and asked, why are you asking this? What magazine? Geographic magazine. Oh, Yun Shishir raised her eyebrows and looked a little surprised. So, you don't just read financial magazines? Of course. Mu Yaja couldn't help but flick her forehead and asked unhappily, am I that rigid in your heart? Yun Shishir covered her forehead and snickered. I just didn't expect you to pay attention to things other than work. Mu Yaja snorted coldly to show his displeasure. He wasn't going to tell her that after he decided to take the wedding photos, he had secretly scouted a lot of places, from Italy to Norway, from Paris to Prague, from Phuket to the Maldives. He had put in a lot of effort just to take the perfect wedding photos. Naturally, women were not the only ones who looked forward to wedding photos. Men also had many ideas. A woman in a wedding dress is the most beautiful. At the youngest and most beautiful age, she put on a holy wedding dress and became his wife. However, with the passage of time, no matter how beautiful her appearance was, it would eventually fade away. To him, a wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime event. Hence, he wanted to keep this happiest moment as a memento. After a few decades, when their hair turned white and they gradually grew old, these happy moments would become precious memories and mementos. He would treasure her best years forever. Chapter 2492. At the thought of this, Mu Yaja gently kissed her sideburns. Wedding photos. Inside the cafe, when Song Enya suggested that they take their wedding photos as soon as possible, the expression on Mu Yanqing's face turned frostier. Suddenly, he tugged at the corners of his lips into a half-smile. It was hard to decipher the meaning behind his smirk. He picked up his coffee cup and took a sip before looking up at the woman opposite him with a mocking and playful gaze. Song Enya, who was sitting opposite him, felt a little uneasy and embarrassed by the man's nonchalant mockery. She snapped, "What are you laughing at? It turns out that Miss Song is quite sentimental, huh? Wedding photos." Mu Yanqing sneered again. "Why don't we just forego the wedding photo shoot? Such things are too pretentious. There's no point in taking them. Besides, you know very well why I married you. Don't you find it repulsive to have me stand next to you for a wedding photo?" With that, he shook his head. "Forget it. Isn't taking wedding photos one of the wedding procedures?" Song Enya said unhappily, "Since we're getting married, we naturally have to go through all the ceremonies and procedures. You know that I'm the eldest daughter of the Song family, so our wedding is very important. This is also the reason why I asked you out this time. Other than that, what about the wedding dress to wear on the wedding day? My mom said that we're only getting married once, so the wedding has to be grand and dignified. The wedding dress must be personally designed by a famous designer, and it has to be custom-made. Also, the accessories and jewels to go with the dress and the diamond ring must be of a larger size. It can't be too shabby." Song Enya was still fuming over the wedding gown incident. What right did Yun Shishir have to have so many custom-made wedding dresses? It's just a wedding, is there a need to have so many custom-made wedding dresses? Can she wear all of them? According to the shop assistant, some of those wedding dresses were for the wedding day, while others were for the wedding photo shoot. Brother Mu is really particular about this wedding. Even the wedding dresses for the photo shoot were custom-made for that *tch to choose from. Choose? He might as well pick blindly. God knows how jealous she was. Therefore, when it came to her marriage, Song Enya was especially obsessed with a wedding dress, to the point of being morbidly obsessed. The more Mu Yanqing listened, the more impatient he became. Mu Linfeng had told him that it would be beneficial for him to have the Song family on his side. Song Enya, as a trump card, could still be put to good use. Hence, he wanted him to be more tolerant of her. At the very least, he was not to damage the harmony between the two families. As for Song Enya's conditions, as long as they could fulfill them, they should not make things too difficult for her. They should at least consider the Song family's feelings. Alas, now that things had come to this, the sight of Song Enya's rouged face was enough to make him lose his appetite. Just sitting across from her and looking at her made him feel uncomfortable all over. Alas, he was already tired of dealing with an unruly woman like Song Enya. This time, Song Enya had asked him to come over to discuss the wedding process. Mu Yanqing happened to have some free time, so he went to meet her. Chapter 2493. Regarding Meng Qingshua's matter, he had already discussed it with Mu Linfeng. The latter had relented, saying that as long as he married Song Enya, the muse would not have any objections if he were to marry a concubine after the situation stabilized. Mu Yanqing was overjoyed when he heard this. Hence, he was determined to find Meng Qingxue. He was very dissatisfied and angry with Meng Qingxue. What is this woman trying to do? She had mysteriously disappeared, mysteriously left his side, mysteriously disappeared without a trace. When she left, she did not bring much money with her. Where could she have run to? In the message, she told him that the child had been aborted. However, based on his understanding of her, he was certain that this woman would not abort the child. If she had really aborted the child, she would definitely not touch the money in the account. Before she left, she had withdrawn a sum of money from the account. It was not much, but he guessed that it was probably because it would be inconvenient for her to work when she moved to another city, so she needed a sum of money to take care of the baby. The child must have not been aborted. Mu Yanqing had been troubled by Meng Qingshua's matter. He did not know what kind of demon had possessed him to be distracted all day because of a woman. What a spineless person. On one hand, he hated himself for not being free and easy enough, and on the other, he hated her for being heartless. However, it was only after Meng Qingxue left that he suddenly realized that this little woman, who he had not taken to heart all this time, actually occupied such an important place in his heart. All along, he had not cared much about her because he was certain that she could not leave him. Other than staying by his side, she had nowhere else to go. It was because of this confidence that he did not seem to cherish her very much. However, when this little woman, who had always been delicate and naive, suddenly disappeared overnight and left him alone with the unborn child in her womb, he anxiously realized that he could also be so restless and anxious because of a woman. For a few days, he did not have a good night's sleep. In his half-awake state, he would always dream of her face. When he woke up in a daze, he always had the illusion that she was sleeping beside him. However, he hurriedly turned on the light and looked at the empty bed beside him. It was icy cold, and his heart was filled with an indescribable sense of loss. Where exactly did she go? There was no news of her. Even if she left a trace, it would be good. At least, it would give him a glimmer of hope. But this heartless woman had left in such a way that she didn't even leave behind a single clue. It made him look like an idiot, aimlessly searching for her. He didn't even know when he would find her. But now, he was going to marry Song Enya. Actually, to him in the past, it did not matter who he married. He thought that marriage was just a dignified procedure. It did not matter who the marriage partner was, as long as it was beneficial to him. Although the Song family could not be compared to the Lin's family, if the two families were to marriage was a marriage, it would definitely be able to resolve the imminent crisis for the Mu group as long as it was beneficial to him. For him, it would be of great help. Chapter 2494. When the time came, he could brazenly bring any woman he wanted back to the Mu family. His wife would not have the right to speak. However, once the wedding date approached, he suddenly felt that marriage was meaningless. After Meng Qingxue left, he tried going to nightclubs to hunt for women like he used to. However, looking at those women with heavy makeup, he suddenly felt that they were very foreign and distant, as if they were unreachable. He also felt that getting to know a new woman and starting a new relationship was an extremely tiring thing. Every time this happened, Meng Qingshue's charming smile would uncontrollably appear in his mind. She lay in his arms and smiled foolishly like a lazy kitten, which was very seductive. Yanqing, she reached out and hooked her arms around his shoulders as she muttered in her sleep. Mu Yanqing. An angry voice finally brought him back to reality. Mu Yanqing came back to his senses and saw Song Enya's angry face. Mu Yanqing, you're distracted. Didn't you hear what I said just now? What did you say? I said that my wedding gowns must be custom-made by a famous designer. It's best if there are 5 of them. 2 will be worn on the wedding day and 3 will be reserved for the wedding photo shoot. Can you do that? Her tone was almost interrogative and very impolite, as if she was giving an order. 5 wedding gowns. Mu Yanqing was quite shocked. This woman was really demanding an exorbitant price. He did not have the mental and physical energy to prepare these. It was not that he could not bear to spend the money on 5 wedding gowns, but he felt that it was unnecessary. Preparing these required not only time and money but also energy. He did not have the patience. Uncontrollably, he recalled the bits and pieces of Meng Qingxue. He vaguely remembered one time when she held his arm and watched a TV show with him. The show was about the style and design of wedding gowns. He said disapprovingly, "A wedding gown is just a procedure for a wedding. It's not worth paying so much attention to." Meng Qingxue pouted coquettishly. It's a girl's ultimate dream to wear a beautiful wedding gown and marry the person she loves. When he heard this, he could not help but ask, "Is this also your ultimate dream?" "Of course not." Pausing for a moment, she said, "My dream is to be with you. If we can get married, I'll feel very lucky. I'm not picky about the wedding gowns. They're simple designs. Even if they're not luxurious or expensive, I don't care." After saying that, she said very proudly, "Because I'll look beautiful no matter what wedding gown." He smiled and kissed her affectionately. "You sly little thing. If you like it, I'll get someone to customize it for you." "Really?" She happily asked, "Will you marry me?" However, he was stunned and fell silent for a moment. Meng Qingxue knew that she had accidentally touched his taboo. He had once told her that he had no intention of getting married when he was with her. Chapter 2495. Since this is your ultimate dream, I've made up my mind. If I can't marry you in the future, I'll give you a wedding gown and have it custom-made for you by a famous designer. What do you think? Meng Qingxue's expression dimmed when she heard this. She did not reply immediately, but a heart-palpitating disappointment appeared on her face. That expression was deeply engraved in his mind. Even now, he could not help but feel his heart ache when he recalled it. Her ultimate dream was probably not a so-called wedding dress, but a marriage partner. As long as it was him, it would be fine. If I really marry you, I'll definitely be so emotional that I'll cry at the wedding, right? She had once said this desolately. Mu Yanqing snapped out of his thoughts and suddenly mocked, 5 wedding gowns. Song Enya, you're really interesting. He raised his head and said, "You know very well why we're getting married. We'll just go through the formalities for the wedding ceremony as an explanation to the songs. As for those custom-made wedding gowns, if you want them, you can get them yourself. Just put the cost of the custom-made gowns on the Mu Group's account." Song Enya said coldly, "You seem to be very perfunctory about our marriage." "Why?" Mu Yanqing raised a brow and was equally aloof. "You seem to be very concerned about it. It even gives me the illusion that you're using those despicable means to marry me." "You?" Song Enya was at a loss for words. After a moment of stalemate, she said hatefully, "Stop dreaming. I want to marry you." "Ha ha. Mu Yanqing, this joke isn't funny at all. I just don't want to lower my status and wrong myself. Given the status of the songs and the muse, our wedding naturally can't be casual. It has to be grand and dignified. But you're not at all concerned about it. You're so perfunctory. From the beginning to the end, you're acting as if you're not involved in this matter at all. You don't have the awareness of being a fiancé at all." Mu Yanqing's lips tugged into a fake smile as he said coldly, "Song Enya, I've already done all I can for you." His voice wasn't loud, but it was powerful enough. He even gritted his teeth as he spoke. Song Enya was stunned when she heard him say, "You used unscrupulous means to marry me, and I suffered such a loss on account of the Song family. Now, you're talking to me about dignity and glory? Song Enya, you must know that I'm already doing you a huge favor by marrying you and giving you a proper status. At this level, you don't have the right to ask too much of me. Once you've gone through the formalities of marriage, you should stop while you can. If you talk about more conditions, I'll get impatient. Impatient? Are you that impatient with me? Or do you treat all women the same way? My attitude has nothing to do with you. Song Enya's eyes suddenly widened in anger. What about that Meng Qingxue, then? Mu Yanqing was stunned and stared at her in surprise. She continued to question, are you also so impatient with that Meng Qingxue? Startled, he asked anxiously, how do you know about her? Why do you care? Let me ask you, how do you know her name? Chapter 2496. Naturally, Song Enya would not tell her about how she had forced Meng Qingxue to back off as the empress that night. She took it for granted that, since Mu Yanqing would become her husband sooner or later, and she had no way out, she had to get rid of all the other women around him to strengthen her position as his legal wife. Hence, she acquiesced to his suspicions and said matter-of-factly, you're my fiancé and future husband. As your future wife, it's only natural that I investigate your past thoroughly. Otherwise, if some stray cats and dogs appear out of nowhere to mess things up when we're about to get married, even if you don't find it embarrassing, I'll find it very embarrassing. After saying that, she casually stirred the coffee, but her heart was filled with guilt. She had almost been exposed. In a moment of anger, she had spoken without thinking. She had been too impulsive. Ha ha. Mu Yanqing sneered and said expressionlessly, Song Enya, do you still have the cheek to say such things? I didn't even pursue the matter of your past deeds. Just the child in your stomach alone is enough for me to selectively ignore it and not pursue your past. If I were to pursue it, your history must be very interesting, right? I hope that you can keep the matter of artificial insemination a secret and not expose it to the public. Otherwise, the muse and songs will be embarrassed along with you. He paused for a moment to admire the lady's ashen face before he continued calmly. Speaking of which, I'm really impressed by you. It's not that I've never seen a woman throw herself at a man, but the things you've done are really impressive. In order to stick to Muyaja, you even went to the US to undergo artificial insemination. But, it's really hard on you. You fought so hard, but in the end, you fell to this point. You went through so much trouble, but you finally married into the Mu family as you wished. Now, I wonder if you're satisfied? Song Enya could not take it anymore. Although Mu Yanqing said these words with a smile, there was a hidden dagger in his smile. Every word he said was hurtful. She felt extremely aggrieved, but she had to pretend to be calm on the surface. She said sternly, Mu Yanqing, shut up. It's not up to you to comment on my affairs. Mu Yanqing laughed. All right, I won't gossip about your past deeds. However, please don't make irresponsible remarks about my matters. Song Enya, let's have a frank talk. After we get married, you just have to take care of yourself and not interfere with my private life. No matter what woman I find outside, it's not up to you to tell me what to do. Do you understand? Looking for a woman? The Missy flew into a rage out of humiliation. Do you know what you're saying? Mu Yanqing retorted coldly, you should know the Mu family's tradition, right? Once I become the official head of the Mu Jia, then I will have the right to marry a few concubines. Although she doesn't have an official status and her seniority isn't as high as yours, she can still enter the Mu family and live under the same roof as you. Since you've decided to marry into the Mu family, then you should be mentally prepared for this. Do you understand? No. Chapter 2497. Song Enya laughed out of anger. Mu Yanqing, you're really something. I haven't even married into your family, yet you're already making an agreement with me. Now you're talking to me about a concubine, and you're even brazenly saying it in front of me. What concubine? Do you think this is an ancient royal family? What era are we in now? We only have one wife, do you still want to have multiple wives? Impossible. I won't allow you to do that. He could not help sneering. Song Enya, you have no right to interfere in my affairs. As the young mistress of the Mu family, you only need to learn to be a virtuous and virtuous wife after marrying into the family. You have no right to interfere in other matters. You. On what basis? He replied, on the basis that you're climbing up the social ladder and not marrying down. Song Enya was stunned. Climbing up the social ladder. How could she have forgotten that there was a distinction between marrying up the social ladder and marrying down the social ladder in the wealthy? In the olden days, when a woman of high status married a man of low status, it referred to the marriage of the emperor's daughter. When a woman of high status married a man of low status, it was a feudal society with a hierarchy of life. In feudal society, the average person had a hierarchy of status, officials had a hierarchy of ranks, and ethnic groups had a hierarchy of status. When a woman of high status married a man of lower status, it was called marrying down the social ladder, such as the Empress Dowager marrying down the social ladder, or the emperor's daughter marrying down the social ladder. Song Enya was different. The Song family and the Mu family were climbing up the social ladder, so the Mus were not very satisfied with this marriage. Hence, most of them did not approve of it. Therefore, at this point in time, the Song family, who was already climbing up the social ladder, could not raise too many demands. Song Enya had high expectations for the wedding. Although the Mus wanted to take care of the woman's feelings, they could not accept all of it. For example, the conditions she raised were too harsh. Now that the Mus capital chain was tight, there could be a breakdown at any time. In other words, the Mus were ready to mortgage their assets for risky financing at any time. Mu Yencheng was naturally displeased that she was being so picky about the wedding. Anyway, don't dream of having an extravagant wedding. If you're so insensible, this marriage will be called off. I didn't want to marry you in the first place, but under second uncle's orders, I reluctantly accepted you and took you in. Giving you a status and a place to settle down is already a great favor. So, if you continue to be so picky, the Mu family won't accept it. Song Enya's face flushed red as her lips trembled violently. Her eyes were brimming with tears of grievance. Mu Yencheng rapped his knuckles on the table. Song Enya, as long as you know what's good for you, you might still be able to get by. But if you don't know what's good for you, even if you just got married, I can send you to the cold palace at any time. With that, he pushed away the coffee in front of him, stood up, stuffed his hands into his trouser pockets, and walked away confidently. His movements were a little violent. It was obvious that he wanted to show her some authority, so much so that the coffee on the table spilled out. Song Enya watched him leave, but she did not say anything to make him stay. After he left the private room and closed the door behind him, tears streamed down her cheeks. That's too much. Although she had high expectations for the wedding, it was definitely not something that was too harsh or difficult. For example, was it too much for her to ask for 5 custom-made wedding dresses? Chapter 2498. Both the Mus and the Songs were prestigious families in the capital. In ancient times, they were like princes. How could the wedding be shabby? Naturally, it had to be dignified. Brother Mu had ordered more than 10 wedding dresses for Yun Shishir to choose from. Was it too much for her to ask for 5 wedding dresses? Was it too much? To put it bluntly, Mu Yencheng did not care about her at all. Song Enya felt so aggrieved that she wanted to cry. She tried her best to hold back her tears, but they still fell uncontrollably. Even though she did not have many fantasies about the wedding itself, since she had decided to marry Mu Yencheng, marriage was not something that could be done on a whim. Marrying this man meant that they would be bound together for the rest of their lives. Instead of being enemies, it was better to slowly get closer to him. Even if they were just like her father and mother, who were hypocritical, at least in the eyes of outsiders, they should treat each other with respect. She had thought about it carefully. It was impossible to force herself to like Mu Yencheng, but it was possible to treat him as her real husband. After all, marriage was a long life. It was impossible to live it half-heartedly. However, once the two of them interacted in private, the smell of gunpowder would spread. At first, she tried to communicate with him calmly, but it did not work at all. Mu Yanqing seemed to be very impatient even when it came to the most basic thing of listening to her. This time, she had asked him out to discuss the wedding, how to arrange a dignified wedding, the marriage proposal, the betrothal gifts, the wedding photos, the wedding, all these needed to be discussed. However, not only was Mu Yanqing impatient, but he was also dismissive of her few requests. Song Enya was filled with resentment and grievance. She picked up the spoon heavily and stirred the coffee in her hand. Just as she was about to take a sip, she suddenly came to her senses and pushed the coffee aside in a fit of anger. She realized that pregnant women were not allowed to drink coffee. This coffee was casually ordered by Mu Yanqing. He really did not care at all. The flesh and blood in her stomach was his. No matter how it came about, at least it was his blood, but he did not seem to care at all. Coffee? Pregnant women were not allowed to drink coffee. Didn't he know that? Song Enya was at a loss for words. She gripped the tablecloth tightly as 2 streams of tears streamed down her face. In the past few days, she was exhausted. Although, in the circle of her close friends, she still looked high and mighty as before. When her close friends found out that she was going to marry into the Mu family, they were very envious. Those jealous eyes fell on her, but it made her a little unhappy. Although he was satisfied on the surface, his mood was downcast from beginning to end. Because she knew in her heart that even if it was an amazing marriage, it was not a happy one. She was confused and worried about her future. When Song Enya returned home, Jiang Qimeng hurriedly went up to her when she saw her walking back in a daze. "Where did you run off to by yourself? Why didn't you answer my calls?" She was extremely worried when she saw Song Enya going out in the afternoon. She made several calls, but no one picked up. "Nothing?" Song Enya asked in annoyance. Noticing her mother's flustered look, she asked curiously, "Mom, what's wrong? Why do you look so pale?" Chapter 2499. At the mention of Lu Jingtian, Song Enya's expression softened and she replied nonchalantly, "Oh, I thought it was something serious. I know that she got into an accident and got burned. She's in the hospital right now. I went to visit her some time ago, and the doctor said that she's recovering well." Even though Lu Jingtian was Song Enya's best friend, it was not as though she had a close relationship with her best friends in their circle. The two could only be said to be very close, but they were not close enough to confide in each other. Moreover, with so many things happening in the Song family recently, Song Enya was physically and mentally exhausted. Her mentality had undergone a huge change, and she no longer cared about anything. "It's not about that. It happened a few days ago. Jingtian committed suicide by jumping off a building. Do you know about this?" Song Enya nodded absent-mindedly. Suddenly, she came to a realization and widened her eyes. "What?" 5 days ago, she committed suicide by jumping off the rooftop of the hospital. Jiang Qimeng said, "The day after tomorrow will be the 7th day of her death. The Lus are preparing to hold a farewell ceremony for her. Are you going?" This news came too suddenly, and Song Enya was not mentally prepared for it. She was dumbfounded. "How is that possible? Mom, is this news accurate?" "Of course." Jiang Qimeng said, "I only confirmed this after reading the obituary published by Huan Yu in the newspaper. Her farewell ceremony is the day after tomorrow. Since you're so close to her, you should attend it." "But I can't," Song Enya hesitated. "I'm getting married soon. It's taboo to attend a funeral and a happy occasion. It's fine if you don't go. It's not an important matter anyway. I'll call the Lus and tell them that you're not feeling well." Song Enya nodded. "I'm not feeling well, I'll go back to my room first." Jiang Qimeng chased after her. "Have you had dinner? Do you want me to bring it up for you?" Song Enya did not reply and walked up the stairs in a cold and cheerless manner. Jiang Qimeng looked at her back worriedly and sighed heavily. That night, the sky was as dark as ink. A large bus slowly stopped at a bus stop. The door opened, and a woman carrying some simple carry-on luggage slowly got off the bus. The door closed and the bus drove away. Meng Qingxue raised her head and glanced at the bus stop sign. Yen City Central Platform. Yen City was a small town about 200 kilometers away from the capital. She took several buses, but she still didn't know where to go. However, she accidentally saw the name of the bus stop. Yen City. Yen City, Yancheng. She bought a ticket to Yen City. Before she got on the train, she bought some bread and water at the station to eat on the way. The 10-hour-long car ride was bumpy. Coupled with her early pregnancy reaction, she vomited out everything she had eaten. Fortunately, the few women in the car with her knew that she was pregnant and took special care of her. The journey was not too torturous. After getting out of the car, there was a village hostel on the opposite side of the road. Perhaps it was because of its history, 2 of the signboards were not lit up. Chapter 2500. She picked up her luggage and walked into the hostel. When she walked in, there was no one at the counter. After shouting for a long time, she finally heard movement from the small dark room. "She's here." A middle-aged man walked out in slippers. When he walked to the counter, he was surprised to see a pure and beautiful young girl standing in front of the counter. Yen City was a very small city. It was so small that almost no one knew about it. Most of the people living here were born and raised in Yen City. Yen City was very small, poor, and backward. Therefore, only the people in Yen City would rush to the big city, but no one in the city would rush here. Unless they were visiting relatives. The boss looked at her and was stunned for a while. He had lived for so long, but he had never seen such a beautiful girl. Yen City was surrounded by mountains. The girls who grew up in Yen City learned how to herd cattle and sheep in the mountains. Their skin was rough from the wild wind in the mountains, and they didn't know how to apply any skincare products. Young girls were not much different from middle-aged women in their 30s or 40s. Their hair was messy, their clothes were sloppy, and they didn't care about their appearance. But this girl was obviously from a good family. She wore decent clothes, had a pretty face, and her skin was extremely good. It was especially so for her eyebrows, which were as exquisite as a painting. Even though she was barefaced and had only slightly drawn her eyebrows, she was still so beautiful that it was shocking. So beautiful. The boss sighed silently in his heart. Then he saw that Meng Qingxue looked thin and weak with a sickly pale face. He couldn't help but be curious. "Little girl, where did you come from?" Meng Qingxue didn't answer his question. Instead, she asked directly, "Boss, are there any rooms here?" The boss was startled and then said, "Yes." "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Yes, I'm alone." "Judging from your accent, you don't seem to be a local. Are you here to look for someone?" "No, I'm just passing by. I'll leave early tomorrow morning." Meng Qingxue was alert and didn't say much to the boss. The boss had been running the hostel for so long and greeted all kinds of passers-by every day. Naturally, he knew how to read people's expressions. He knew that she was wary of him, so he didn't ask any more questions. "Take out your ID card for registration." Meng Qingxue immediately rummaged through her bag. Then, she suddenly thought of something. "If I use my ID card to register, will Mu Yanqing find me here?" At this thought, she trembled with fear. She looked up and forced a smile. "How can you go out without your ID card?" "Of course I'm an adult," she explained nervously. Meng Qingxue was speechless. "Are the prices here so cheap?" "It only costs 60 yuan a night. In the capital, a night's stay would cost at least 300 yuan. Chapter 2501. Could it be an unlicensed hotel? Her imagination ran wild as she took out 200 yuan from her bag and handed it over. The boss passed the room card to her. "Room 209 on the second floor. If you want to take a shower, run the tap for a while before the hot water comes out." "Okay." Meng Qingxue nodded. Just as she was about to turn around, a few shirtless young men came down from the stairs. "Boss, 2 packs of 24 Furong King. The boss replied cheerfully, okay. He took out 2 packs of cigarettes from the counter and asked, how's the harvest tonight? Sigh, bad luck. I've lost so badly that I've almost lost all my wife's money. How much did you lose? 10,000 yuan. The boss was speechless. Aya, that's a lot. While they were talking, Meng Qingxue looked up and saw 2 bare-chested men with tattoos quickly walking down the stairs. Her heart skipped a beat, and she immediately became vigilant. She hid to the side, not daring to look at them. Judging from the appearance of the 2 young men, they were probably hooligans or something like that, right? They also spoke like a hooligan. In short, they weren't simple people. The 2 men also noticed her, and their eyes lit up. Seeing that she was dressed so beautifully, and it was so late at night, they naturally misunderstood her. Boss, when did your family start doing this business? Why didn't you say anything? We were just worried about not having any fun. These men obviously thought of her as a prostitute. The boss couldn't hide his embarrassment and immediately explained, Brother Dong, Brother Cheng, you misunderstood. This is a guest of the hotel. It's not what you think. After saying that, the boss hurriedly gave her a look. Go up quickly. Room 209 on the 2nd floor. Don't get the wrong room. Meng Qingxue quickly nodded. She clutched her bag tightly and walked up to the 2nd floor with her head down. One of the young men saw her frightened expression and then looked at her appearance. She was so beautiful that it was as if water could be squeezed out of her skin. In Yen City, it was impossible to find such a beautiful girl. The girls in Yen City had rough skin. Even if there were some good seedlings, they would be destroyed by the wind in the mountains. Most of the girls who grew up in Yen City started doing farm work when they were young. They worked in the fields, did laundry, and cooked. How could they be so beautiful? Out of the blue, he had evil intentions, so when Meng Qingxue was about to brush past him, he actually reached out to stop her. Meng Qingxue bypassed his outstretched arm and was about to walk towards the stairs. The young man was also hot-blooded. Seeing that he was slapped in the face, he actually bumped her with his shoulder. Ah! Meng Qingxue staggered and almost fell down the stairs. She wanted to protect the child in her belly and hurriedly reached out to steady herself. Her bag fell to the ground. The 2 young men looked at her bag. The zipper of the bag was not pulled up. Vaguely, through the open gap, she could see a stack of red RMB notes in the bag. Both of them jumped in fright. So much money. At least 10 to 20,000. Could this woman be the daughter of a rich family? When Meng Qingxue saw it, her face darkened. She hurriedly picked up the bag, hugged it to her chest, and hurried upstairs. Chapter 2502. Let go. Meng Qingxue said coldly. The young man smacked his lips, looking very displeased. He muttered, why are you so fierce? Then, he sighed. Seeing her nervous expression, he shook his head and said, don't worry. Young lady, we're not bad people. We're just curious. Why are you alone so late at night? It's very dangerous for a young lady to be out in the middle of the night. Meng Qingxue flung his hand away and said angrily, please behave yourself. Seeing that she was angry, the young man suddenly found it very interesting. Behave myself. You're a young lady, but you're quite knowledgeable. Don't you know that I hate intellectuals the most? As he spoke, he tried to pull her arm again. Meng Qingxue hated this kind of pulling the most. She took a step back and warned, don't get physical. Why? Can't I? The young man spoke like a hooligan. Hearing Meng Qingxue's warning, his attitude became even more rude. He bared his teeth and glared at her. Meng Qingxue was scared out of her wits. However, even so, she still pretended to be calm and said fiercely, please show some respect. Otherwise, I'm going to call the police. Seeing that she was going to call the police, the young man raised his eyebrows. However, he let go of her hand and cursed. The boss quickly came up to smooth things over. Brother Dong, Brother Dong. She's a guest. If you make things difficult for her, you'll be destroying my place. She's a young lady, and it's not easy for her to come all the way here. She's rushing back to her room to rest. Don't make things difficult for her. Okay, okay. I got it. Brother Dong waved his hand. The boss quickly gave Meng Qingxue a look. Meng Qingxue felt as if she had been granted amnesty. She hugged her bag and rushed up to the second floor. She found the room number and swiped the card to enter the room. As soon as she closed the door, she hurriedly closed the door as if there was an evil spirit chasing after her. She quickly locked the door and bolted the chain. Only when she was certain that she was safe did she let out a long sigh. She sat down on the bed and placed her bag beside her, but she was still in a state of shock. The standard room was very small, with a simple single bed covered with a yellowish-white quilt. Meng Qingxue raised her head and looked around. She saw that the small room did not even have a table or a television. There was not even an air conditioner, only a heater. She walked to the bathroom and took a look. It was also relatively simple. No wonder it was cheap. There was a very small skylight in the room. Meng Qingxue suddenly became nervous. She suddenly remembered a piece of news. It was also about a young lady who stayed alone in a hotel. There was a skylight in the room. A thief used something like sleeping incense and stuck it into the window. When people smelled the fragrance, they fell asleep. The thief then climbed in through the window and stole all the valuables. She hurriedly stepped on the bed, closed the skylight, and locked it. She only felt more at ease after she had locked all the windows and doors. By then, she was already drenched in cold sweat. She walked to the bathroom, turned on the tap, and turned on some water. When the water was hot, she took a simple shower and went to bed to rest. The night deepened. She lay on the bed. Just as she was about to fall asleep, she suddenly heard a series of footsteps outside the door. Ever since she became pregnant, she had been a light sleeper and was easily awakened by small sounds. Chapter 2503. Meng Qingxue opened her eyes abruptly and sat up from the bed in shock. She looked at the door warily. She subconsciously wanted to ask who was outside the door, but just as she was about to speak, she heard a familiar man's voice mumbling at the door. This broken thing is quite difficult to deal with. The man beside him asked, "Can you do it?" "I should be able to." Immediately after, she heard a beeping electronic sound. Meng Qingxue could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. The two men's voices were not unfamiliar. They were the two gangsters she had met at the front desk of the hostel. A chill ran down her spine, and she suddenly became vigilant. She quietly got out of bed and tiptoed to the door. She turned on the smoke and looked outside. In the dimly lit corridor, a magnified face of a man with his head bowed came into view. She remembered him. The hostel owner addressed him as Brother Dong. He seemed to be a gangster with some background. Even the owner was very respectful to him. She guessed that these two men had probably booked a room in the hostel to play mahjong or some other activity. She heard them say that they had lost 10,000 yuan in one night, so they were probably gambling. She then thought of how they had clearly seen the cash in her bag when she dropped it on the floor. Could it be that they had some evil thoughts because of that? Meng Qingxue was not stupid. She leaned against the corner of the door, not daring to make a sound. She even deliberately kept her breathing as light as possible. She heard Brother Dong muttering outside the door, "It's quite difficult to deal with. TSK, TSK. Let's try taking this thing apart." Oh no. Meng Qingxue was startled. Could it be that he wanted to swipe the card? Could it be that they wanted to break in? She heard that the average hotel's card reader was easy to crack. Some people who played video games would carry electronic interference devices with them. The card reader at the door was useless in front of this device. At the thought of this, she glanced at the latch on the door in trepidation. Fortunately, it was chained. What should I do? What should I do? This was the first time she had encountered such a situation. She subconsciously took out her phone to call for help, but the only number that appeared in her mind was Mu Yancheng. No way. She couldn't call him for help. It would make her seem like a spineless person. Since she had left him, she had to be more straightforward. She couldn't be sloppy, and she definitely couldn't be attached to him. Meng Qingxue clutched her phone tightly and hid it in her pocket. She was on tenterhooks as she listened to the man's every move. Suddenly, there were a few hurried "dee-dee" sounds, and the door was opened. The man reached out to push the door open, but the chain on the latch blocked the door. He couldn't push it open for a while. Quang Quang, the man tried to push her away a few times, but to no avail. He cursed fiercely, "This woman is quite vigilant, huh? The bolt on the inside of the door is also locked. Adon, who do you think this woman is? She looks like the daughter of a rich family. I don't know what he's doing in Yen City, bringing so much cash with him. Who knows? Hee hee. If it wasn't for the cash in her bag, what's the point? This girl looks quite pretty. It's not a bad idea to get her to play with her." Chapter 2504. Don't mess around. Just get the money. Don't try anything funny. If things get out of hand, both of us will be in big trouble. What if this woman has a powerful background? What will you do then? Brother Dong was obviously an experienced man and knew that some things could lead to bad luck. After a pause, he suddenly spat and scolded, "What should we do if we can't break the chains? We can't get in. Adon, this room should have a skylight, right? We can just go in through the skylight." Meng Qingxue jerked her head toward the skylight behind her when she heard this. She sucked in a breath of cold air in shock. Tears streamed down her cheeks as her breathing quickened slightly due to the immense fear she felt. The two men outside the door took turns kicking the door and startled her. "Ah!" Meng Qingxue screamed in fear. "You! What are you trying to do?" The two men were startled. The one called Dong immediately reacted and laughed a few times. Listening to the sound, it came from close to the door. It was obvious that the person was standing by the door. It turned out that the person had long been awakened by their movements. He was probably hiding at the door, too scared to make a sound. "Little girl, you're not sleeping. What are you doing? What are you trying to do?" "We're playing with you." Adon said matter-of-factly, "Is this your first time in Yen City? Why don't we take you to the night market nearby? I'll treat you to a barbecue." "No, I'm going to sleep. Don't disturb me, okay?" Her tone was close to begging. Without a doubt, she was traumatized and her psychological defense was on the verge of collapse. Adon sneered and said disapprovingly, "Sleep? You're still awake, aren't you?" His unreasonable tone made Meng Qingxue frown. "I'm going to sleep. What's there to sleep about? As long as you're alive, you should sleep less and have more fun. When you're dead, you'll have plenty to sleep with." Adon made up a fallacious argument in a hooligan's tone. Meng Qingxue was so anxious that she was about to break down. She blocked the door and said in a trembling voice, "Don't be like this. I'm scared. I'm really scared. I'm only staying here for one night and will leave tomorrow morning." "I'll leave tomorrow morning. Can you let me go?" "Sister, what are you talking about?" Another one called Ching said slowly, "We don't want to hurt you, we just want to play with you. The people of Yen City are very hospitable. Since you're here, I'll naturally take you to the fun places in Yen City." "I don't want that." Meng Qingxue screamed, "You want money, don't you?" Her clever intuition immediately guessed their purpose. The two men outside the door were stunned at first, then said, "If you say it like that, it's meaningless. Since you've said it, it just so happens that we're short of money. Since you're so rich, why don't you be more generous? Damn it, I lost more than 10,000 yuan tonight. Little sister, why don't you lend me some money and I'll gamble again? I'll return it to you when I win it back." "No. Meng Qingxue said with a pale face, "This money is very important to me." This money was for her to take care of her baby. Chapter 25:05. She couldn't give them the money. She trembled as she took out her phone. Looking at the empty address book, she clicked on the dial screen and pressed 1. Even her fingertips were trembling. "If you're still so stubborn, I'm going to call the police." Hearing that she was going to call the police, the two men outside the door immediately laughed out loud. "All right, call the police if you dare. I forgot to say earlier that even if you call the police, there's nothing to be afraid of. I know all the police officers in the police station. Even if you call the police, they can't do anything to me. But if you dare to call the police, I'll make sure you're in for it." His words were a blatant threat. Meng Qingxue was also intimidated by his words. However, when she calmed down and thought about it carefully, she remembered that earlier at the front desk, she had also said that if he continued to pester her, she would call the police. Hearing that she was going to call the police, the two men immediately restrained themselves. Therefore, Meng Qingxue naturally suspected that this man was just bluffing to scare her. She wasn't going to be threatened by him. Thinking of this, she dialed 110. When the call went through, she explained the situation in a fluster. Then, she heard the two men outside the door cursing and mentioning the hotel's address. When the two men outside the door heard that she had already called the police, they started cursing. "Damn it! Adon, this woman is really bold. She actually called the police. If we don't teach her a lesson, she'll really think that we're small fries, huh? Son of AB*TCH. Adon obviously didn't expect that she would actually dare to call the police. He had already threatened her so viciously, but she didn't know how to be afraid at all. After hanging up, Meng Qingxue had already called the police. The police said that they would be here soon, so she suddenly felt safe and wasn't afraid of their threats anymore. She said coldly, "I've already called the police. The police will be here soon. Get out of my way." Her forcefulness had obviously angered the two men. Outside the door, the man named Adon took a deep puff of his cigarette and threw the burnt cigarette butt on the ground. He lifted his leg and kicked the door fiercely. He said angrily, "B*TCH. Open the door. Open the door." Clang clang clang, the violent sound of the door being kicked made her scream in shock. Adon kicked especially hard. She even clearly heard a painful groan from the door, as if the wood inside of the door was breaking. If he continued kicking with such force, he would break a hole in the door. "Are you crazy? I've already called the police, and the police will be here soon. The police will be here soon." She anxiously pushed the door with her hand, but the next second, the man outside kicked the door fiercely again. Meng Qingxue was caught off guard. She took a few steps back from the impact of the door and hit the wall. Fortunately, she instinctively used her elbow to support herself. Even though the impact was too painful, her elbow was still red and swollen. She covered her painful joint. In her panic, she felt wronged and couldn't stop crying. She bit her lip hard, and the salty tears fell into the gap between her lips. It was extremely bitter. Chapter 25:06. Meng Qingxue said in despair, "Why do you have to go against me? I didn't mean to provoke you. Can you be merciful and not provoke me?" She hated the fact that she wasn't a man and didn't have the strength to protect herself in such a situation. It was said that men and women were equal, but the most hateful thing was that men and women weren't born equal. Women had always been the weaker group. They didn't have a man's tall stature or strong arms. In a critical situation, they didn't even have the ability to protect themselves. In such a situation, other than begging for mercy, what else could she do? This world was too cruel. The strong preyed on the weak. Did the weak deserve to be bullied? Did the strong have the right to bully the weak? What kind of strong person was that? The two men outside the door kicked and kicked at the door. Meng Qingxue, who was still in shock, could only curl up in a corner. She covered her face and cried uncontrollably. However, after an unknown amount of time, the two men outside the door finally knew to stop. Immediately after, there was a hurried knock on the door. "Is anyone there?" It was a woman's low voice. Meng Qingxue was awakened by the voice and raised her head abruptly. In such a dangerous situation, hearing a woman's voice made her feel strangely safe. She raised her head and asked with tears in her eyes, "Who is it? Are you the one who reported the case? Were you the one who called the police 10 minutes ago?" The woman asked. "I was. May I know who you are?" "I'm the police officer in charge of this area." The woman continued, "It's fine now. The troublemaker is under control. Could you please open the door?" Meng Qingxue was still in shock. She stood up in fear and looked through the peephole. She saw a young woman in a police uniform standing outside the door, looking anxious. Only then was she relieved. She carefully pulled out the latch and opened the door. The woman slowly pushed the door open and walked in. Meng Qingxue turned on the lights and stood aside with her head down. The woman glanced at her. There were obvious tear stains on her face, and her eyes were red and swollen. She looked pitiful. She immediately said, "My surname is Chu Ho. My name is Chu Ho. I'm sorry for being late. Are you okay?" Meng Qingxue was still in shock, her whole body trembling. Seeing her like this, Chu Ho couldn't help but soften his heart. This girl looked very young, probably very young. He didn't know why she came to Yen City alone. It seemed that she had suffered a lot. Her delicate appearance made people want to protect her. She quickly said, "It's okay. You're safe now." "Yes. Thank you, Officer Chu." Meng Qingxue was full of respect and gratitude. Another male auxiliary police officer was about to enter when Chu Ho suddenly turned around and shouted, "Don't come in." "What's wrong, Sister Chu? It's not convenient for you to come in." Chu Ho noticed from the moment he came in that this woman didn't seem to be wearing a bra. Hence, a certain part of her body was very obvious. It was not convenient for a male police officer to come in. "Wait outside the door." "Okay." Chapter 2507. Meng Qingxue's fear finally subsided a little. Only then did she carefully raise her head to look at the woman. Standing in front of her was a woman in uniform. Her posture was straight and her figure was well proportioned. Under the brim of her cap was a face the size of a palm. She was barefaced and did not put on any rouge or lipstick. However, her face was very clean. Her eyes were very big and beautiful. The black and white of her eyes were very distinct. Her nose bridge was high, and her lips were red and her teeth were white. She looked very kind, but with the police uniform, she looked a little serious and handsome. Although she did not put on any makeup and was not like Meng Qingxue who knew how to take care of her skin, her plain face was very beautiful. Her facial features were distinct and the contours of her face were exquisite. Although she was not a peerless beauty, she did not lose her aura. Her skin was healthy and fair. In a city like Yen City, it was rare to see someone with such good skin. Chu Ho saw that she kept staring at her. She touched her face curiously and smiled. "Why do you keep staring at my face? Is there something on my face?" "No. No." Meng Qingxue lowered her head in embarrassment and asked, "Where are the other two people?" "Which two?" "One is called Adon, and the other is called Ah Cheng. Oh, they're outside the door." "Outside the door?" Meng Qingxue could not help but feel afraid again. Did that mean that the two villains had not left yet? Then, she had already called the police. If she could not do anything to them, would they take revenge on her in the future? Chu Ho seemed to understand her concerns and comforted her, "Young lady, don't be afraid. I'm here. They won't be able to hurt you." Between her words, she exuded a sense of justice. It was definitely not an act. Meng Qingxue could not help but have a good impression of her. In the past, she had come into contact with some police officers. In her impression, some of them did not give her much sense of security when they wore their uniforms. However, this police officer named Chu Ho was a heroine. She was different from the male police officers in that she was more humane and gentle. Little girl, when Meng Qingxue heard this term, she couldn't help but laugh. You don't seem to be much older than me. I should be a few years older than you, right? I'm 24. But you look about the same as me. As the two of them exchanged pleasantries, the tense atmosphere was immediately diluted. In order to calm her down, Chu Ho chatted with her briefly before saying, "Change your clothes. Let's go back to the police station and make a statement." Okay. Chu Ho went out of the room. About 10 minutes later, Meng Qingxue changed her clothes, combed her hair, and walked out. When Meng Qingxue walked out, she saw Chu Ho standing in front of Adon and Ah Chang with her hands behind her back. However, for some reason, the three of them seemed to know each other. What was even more unbelievable was that Chu Ho seemed to have a lot of authority in front of these two hooligans. In front of her, they trembled and lowered their heads. Whatever Chu Ho said, they obediently answered without any hesitation. Chu Ho asked, "Are you guys gambling again?" "It's not gambling. It's just a small matter. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal." Chu Ho snorted coldly. "Not a big deal, and you're thinking of robbing other young ladies? Sister Chu, is it your turn to be on duty at the police station tonight?" Chapter 2508. What bad luck. Why was his luck so bad to bump into the demoness on duty and fall into her hands again? The gentleness on Chu Ho's face when she was talking to Meng Qingxue was nowhere to be seen. She looked stern. "You don't have to care who's on duty. I'm asking you a question and you have to answer honestly." Adon smiled obsequiously and stepped forward slightly. He said cheekily, "Isn't this an attempt?" We didn't do it for real. We drank too much last night and the alcohol got to our heads, so, we were just trying to scare her." Chu Ho clicked her tongue impatiently and raised her leg to kick him, sending him to the ground. Who knew where she got her strength from to be able to sweep a 1.8-meter-tall man to the ground? Meng Qingxue widened her eyes in shock and disbelief. Adon groaned in pain. Chu Ho said expressionlessly, "Scare her. You're a man and you're here to scare a girl instead of doing what you need to do. You're lucky you didn't bump into me. Otherwise, I would have dislocated your arm." Adon crawled up from the ground in fear and trepidation. He said miserably, "Sister Chu, I was a jerk. I was wrong. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just be gentle with me. I didn't use my brain. I didn't learn from my mistakes. I was wrong. I know I was wrong." There was a reason why Adon was so afraid of Chu Ho. Last time, it was also because of a crime. The cause of the incident was that Adong stole money from a widow's shop in the east of the city. The amount was not much, only a few thousand yuan, but this few thousand yuan was more than a year's worth of expenses for that family. The widow had a child and two elderly people. They were living a hard life. To make ends meet, they opened a fast food restaurant next to the factory in the east of the city. The whole family relied on this small restaurant for their daily necessities. In the early years, her husband went abroad to work to help build railways in Africa. In the end, he contracted an epidemic and died in a foreign land. In the end, even his body could not be brought back. The poor woman had lost her husband, so she had to earn her own living. She worked hard to run the fast food restaurant to make ends meet. After Chu Ho found out about this, he detained Adon and taught him a lesson. In short, he was very heavy-handed. The money that Adon stole wasn't even enough for him to treat his injuries. Adon was very famous in the local area of Yen City. Of course, it was not a good reputation, but a bad reputation. He was a notorious gangster who committed all kinds of crimes. Many people did not dare to do anything to him. When something happened, they did not dare to call the police for fear of his revenge. He also had a lot of arrogant underlings under him. Because of this, he was extremely rampant in the local area. However, ever since Chu Ho had taken office, he had dealt with Adon a few times. This arrogant hooligan had completely fallen into her hands. This woman was incredible. She was simply a demoness. It was not that he did not think of revenge, but the key point was that this woman was too ruthless. He did not know where she got her skills from. He brought a group of underlings to encircle her, but in the end, he was beaten to a pulp. After she took office, she used her righteousness to bring the local law and order to a new level. Many senior officers in the police station were not convinced, so they privately challenged her to a competition. Chapter 2509. In the end, many male police officers who had retired from the army were no match for her. As for Adon, ever since he was taught a lesson by her, he had become much more well-behaved. When he saw her, he was so scared that he bowed and did not dare to say a word. This time, he had fallen into her hands again. On the way back to the police station, Meng Qingxue sat in the front passenger seat while an auxiliary police officer held the two of them in the back seat. Chu Ho drove the police car all the way back to the police station. Their statements were taken and recorded, but in reality, they did not cause any serious harm. Hence, at most, they could only be reprimanded. They were not even detained. Chu Ho was furious. After scolding the two of them, she called them to the detention room and closed the door. Meng Qingxue was curious about where the three of them went. She quickly asked the auxiliary police officer beside her. The auxiliary police officer said, "I guess they went to reprimand them." Reprimand them? The auxiliary police officer's expression suddenly changed. Sister Chu's method of dealing with trash like this has always been very rough. Let's beat them up first. Beat. These two guys have a lot of criminal records here. They are regulars in the police station. Sister Chu is annoyed by them. This time, she probably beat them up pretty hard, right? Just as expected. When Chu Ho brought the two of them out, Adon and Ah Cheng, who were following behind them, had bruises all over their faces. Especially their eyes, one was black and the other was purple. When they walked slowly, Chu Ho followed and kicked them. She sternly scolded, "Can't you walk properly?" "Yes. Yes. The next time I see you, I won't be so nice," Chu Ho said with a look of disgust. Two grown men looking for trouble with a girl. "I feel ashamed for you. Sister Chu, we know our mistake. We won't do it again." Chu Ho said coldly, "Haha. Don't do it again. You won't be able to avoid going to jail." The two of them left the police station with their faces covered in dirt. They looked like rats crossing the street. Chu Ho walked to Meng Qingxue. She raised her eyebrows and smiled. "Okay, it's okay. You can go back now." Meng Qingxue was suddenly a little worried. She stammered, wanting to say something, but hesitated. Suddenly, she asked worriedly, "I definitely don't dare to stay in that hostel. I just don't know if there are any other hostel around here, or a cheaper one. I'll stay here for a night and look for a place to stay tomorrow morning." Looking for a house? Chu Ho was surprised. "Are you looking for a house in Yen City?" "Yes." "Why?" Chu Ho was even more puzzled. "Only the people here are racking their brains to rush to the city, but I've never seen anyone from the city come to this remote and desolate place." Meng Qingxue wanted to say something but hesitated. Her face was full of worry. Chu Ho knew that she was going back to the hostel alone. He was worried that the two hooligans would go back and take revenge, so he said helplessly, "If you don't mind, why don't you come to my house first? It just so happens that I'm also getting off work, so I'll give you a ride home." "Can I?" Meng Qingxue was a little uneasy. "Won't I disturb you?" Chu Ho shook her head and said generously, "No, you won't. There's only me and my son at home. The house is quite big, so there's an empty room for you to stay in." Meng Qingxue was a little surprised. "Son? You're married?" She was surprised because Chu Ho was so young that she didn't look like a married woman with children. Chu Ho shook her head. No. Chapter 25:10. Meng Qingxue suddenly realized that she had asked too much. She immediately shut her mouth and said resentfully, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked about your private matters. It's fine. Chu Ho said, I don't know how to answer this question because I don't know who the father is. How can that be? Meng Qingxue frowned curiously. She was more concerned about this topic because she might have found a kindred spirit. A single mother. An unmarried pregnancy. Living alone with a child. Chu Ho's characteristics were too similar to hers. It was as if he was a projection of her. Perhaps, this woman had a more complicated past. However, Chu Ho's words, because I don't know who the father is. She was completely shocked. How could he not know who the father was? Chu Ho saw that her eyes were full of curiosity, but he didn't seem to be disgusted. He smiled and said casually, this matter is complicated. We'll talk about it later. I'm going to change first. Just wait for me here. Okay. Meng Qingxue sat on the chair obediently and waited. When Chu Ho walked out after changing into his casual clothes, Meng Qingxue immediately stood up. Let's go back to the inn. Meng Qingxue was a little surprised, but she heard Chu Ho say, some of your clothes are still there, right? Plus your deposit, it should be returned. She immediately said, actually, it's fine if you don't return it. Is it really fine? Chu Ho stopped in his tracks and looked her up and down unhurriedly. Suddenly, he smiled and said meaningfully, since you're pregnant and want to give birth to the child, you need to spend money on food and clothes. Naturally, you have to save some money. Meng Qingxue was shocked. She opened her mouth but didn't say anything in the end. She followed him silently. Chu Ho drove a motorcycle. He started the engine and put on the helmet. Then, he patted the back seat and said, get on. Meng Qingxue got on. Hug me. The wind is strong. It's better to hide behind me. Aren't you cold? I'm used to it. I have a good physique. Okay. Chu Ho drove her back to the inn and took back the deposit and clothes. The inn owner also felt embarrassed about what had happened. Moreover, he gave Chu Ho face, so he gave her the money for the room. On the way back, Meng Qingxue asked curiously, Officer Chu, just call me Sister Chu. How did you know that I'm pregnant? She didn't mention anything about it from the beginning to the end. How did she find out? Chu, he said, on the way here, when you were sitting in the front passenger seat, I saw you lowering your head and silently stroking your lower abdomen. Only pregnant women would do such a thing. Meng Qingxue was stunned for a moment. Then, she realized what was going on. She couldn't help but admire her keen observation. You were so observant. Where's the child's father? Chu Ho suddenly asked, why are you alone? Isn't the child's father with you? Meng Qingxue's face suddenly showed a look of disappointment. Then, she smiled bitterly and said, my father doesn't want this child, but I want it, so. Chapter 25:11. Meng Qingxue was surprised by her analytical ability. She was stunned for a moment before she said, I really can't bear to do that. This is our flesh and blood, and also my first child. I can't abandon him. Maybe it's because of my maternal instincts. Just imagine how painful it would be to have an abortion and the separation of flesh and blood. Did that man let you down? Chu Ho suddenly asked. Meng Qingxue's gaze was a little empty. She lowered her eyelashes silently and suddenly laughed. It's not that I let him down. It's just that from the beginning to the end, it was more of my wishful thinking. I realized that I shouldn't continue to be obsessed with him since I've woken up from my dream. Now, I just want to rent a small house in a small, nameless city, peacefully give birth to the child, and raise him. There aren't many vacant houses for rent in Yen City because the people here are more conservative. They're not very willing to rent out their houses. Chu-ho changed the topic. However, if you don't mind, you can stay at my place. Your place? Chu-ho said, I bought a house last year. Although it's not big, there's an extra room. If you don't mind, you can stay there. Really? Meng Qingxue was overjoyed. She didn't expect to find a stable place to live so quickly. More importantly, the person who provided the house was the police, so at least her personal safety was guaranteed. How about the rent? There's no need to pay rent, right? Anyway, the house is empty, and now there's a layer of dust on it. Meng Qingxue was dissatisfied. The rent should be paid. Since I'm living in your house, then I should pay you rent. There's no doubt about that. If you insist on giving me 300 yuan, then I'll take it. The rent here isn't expensive. Meng Qingxue said, okay. After a moment of silence, Chu-ho suddenly said, it's hard to raise a child alone. As a single mother, she would be questioned and ridiculed from all sides. The cost of food, clothing, and all the expenses would be like a mountain pressing down on her shoulders. Yes, but I understand how you feel. Because when I found out that I was pregnant, even if I didn't have any memory of the child's father, the innate maternal instinct in a woman's bones seemed to awaken overnight, and I was indeed extremely reluctant to part with him. She has no memory of the child's father. Meng Qingxue was shocked. How is that possible? Don't you know how the child came about? Chu-ho looked straight ahead and said expressionlessly, 5 years ago, when I woke up, I was in a homestay in Yen City. Yen City is close to the sea. They all said that I was fished out from the sea. When they found me, I was lying on a large wooden board and had fainted. Fortunately, my limbs were frozen stiff, so I didn't fall into the sea. When I woke up, I had almost no memory. I didn't even know my own name. The name, Chu-ho, was given to me by myself. No memory at all. Meng Qingxue asked carefully, is it because of amnesia? Chapter 25:12. You don't have any memories? Meng Qingxue asked carefully, is it because of amnesia? Chu-ho said, yeah, the back of my head seems to have been hit by a hard object. It's bleeding. The doctor said that I don't have any memory of my past. It's probably because my head was hit. Your head was hit? Meng Qingxue was a little surprised. Don't tell me you don't have any memory of what happened before. Yeah, I don't even remember who I am. Even my name, my past, my background, and who my family is, I don't have any memory of it. Chu-ho paused and said, the doctor said that this is a temporary amnesia and that there's a chance that I'll regain my memory in the future. But even after 5 years, I still can't remember a single thing about my past. Meng Qingxue was a little surprised. At the same time, she felt that it was a little unbelievable. When I regained my consciousness, my mind was blank. I tried hard to remember, but the doctor said that it's probably because I'm in a very unfamiliar city. If I can find the place where I used to live, I might have a chance to regain my memory. Chu-ho continued, however, the most troublesome thing is that I don't even remember where my home is. Then you must feel very helpless, right? Meng Qingxue was silent for a moment and said, if I had forgotten anything and went to a very unfamiliar place, I would definitely feel very lost. Even if I'm lost, I still have to try my best to survive. Chu-ho told her what happened next. After her body recovered, she left the hospital. Because she had nowhere to go, she settled down in the village. Because she didn't have any identification, the village chief went to the relevant departments to investigate the missing person, but there was no result. The village chief felt sorry for her being alone, so he let her stay at his house and settled down. 8 months later, the child was born. It was a healthy little boy. The village chief immediately used his connections to register the child's DNA on the internet. That way, even if there was a clue, they could quickly investigate the ins and outs of her identity. Before she got this job, she helped the village chief and his family do some work in the fields. However, she accidentally discovered the hidden potential in her body. Once, at night, she rode her bike to the county to help the village head and his family purchase some daily necessities. At that time, the entertainment industry in the county had just started to rise. On the streets of the town center, there were many sauna shops, karaoke shops, and small bars. On her way home, she happened to meet a group of hooligans who were pestering a lone woman. Those hooligans seemed to be drunk and were touching the woman. She couldn't stand it and went to help them. Unexpectedly, one of the men who seemed to be the leader of the group took out a dagger and waved it at her as if he was threatening her. Seeing that the dagger was about to cut into her body, she leaped into the air out of instinct and did a suave roundhouse kick. The man fell to the ground and fainted in an instant, losing consciousness. A group of people rushed up. In the end, there were 3 to 5 burly men, but within a few minutes, they were easily knocked to the ground by her. Each and every one of them was obedient. Chapter 25:13. Coincidentally, the chief of the police station and the village chief were cousins. Thus, in the end, by a freak combination of factors, she entered the police station to work. Although she did not enter the establishment and her income was not high, her life gradually became better. Chu-ho said, "I don't think much of my past now. It doesn't matter if I can't get my memories back. Perhaps, they aren't good memories, so it's fine if I forget them. The doctor said that it might be selective amnesia. My instincts don't want those memories, so my brain temporarily deleted them. Hence, I chose to go with the flow." When Meng Qingxue heard this, she felt a little complicated. She was inexplicably envious of her. If she could, she also wanted to lose those memories of the past. They were all memories that she did not want to recall. The bits and pieces of her childhood, the scenes with Mu Yancheng, were of course blissful and happy, but most of them were sadness, pain, and numbness. After half an hour's drive, they arrived at Chu Ho's house in no time. Chu He's house was located in a village. It was an ordinary household with a single door, but the house wasn't big. It looked like it had been renovated. The interior decoration also looked very new, but it was renovated not long ago. It wasn't as dilapidated as she had imagined on the way here. The house had snow-white walls and a tiled floor. Although the furnishings were simple, it gave off a sense of belonging. It was obvious that Chu Ho was a woman who knew how to live a good life. Meng Qingxue had just stepped into the house with Chu Ho when she heard hurried footsteps coming from the corridor. From the sound of the footsteps, a child of about 5 or 6 years old bounced down the stairs. Then, a clean and delicate little boy appeared in front of her. Meng Qingxue was shocked. She was probably surprised because this little boy was really too beautiful. He had snow-white skin, clear black and white eyes, exquisite facial features that were still childish, and the outline of his face was watery and cute. His eyebrows were especially beautiful. He was dressed very simply, just like the other children in the village. He wore a thick cotton-padded jacket and a pair of sports shoes on his feet. When he walked, they shone brightly, making him look very childlike. "Mom!" Little Bean excitedly pounced on her and threw himself into her arms. Chu Ho said with pity and blame, "Why didn't you slow down when you went downstairs? What if you fell?" Meng Qingxue, who was standing at the side, could not help but feel warmth in her heart. The Chu Ho of today was no longer as dignified and righteous as when she faced the 2 hooligans, nor was she as cool and handsome as when she was in uniform. She gently held the little girl in her arms, her whole body exuding the unique radiance of a mother. "Are there any good girls at home?" "Yes. The baby is very obedient at home. He went to bed early in the morning and didn't peek at the TV." The little bean said in all seriousness. His childish voice was innocent and unaffected. However, his words revealed that he was trying to hide something. If he went to bed early in the morning, he would still be wearing sneakers. He must have secretly watched TV and hadn't slept yet. His little brain was so innocent and cute that she did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, Chu Ho did not expose him. Instead, she scratched the tip of his nose and deliberately said fiercely, "Why did you come down when you were asleep? Did mommy wake you up?" Chapter 25:14. Little Bean said solemnly, otherwise, when Mommy opens the door, the house will be empty. She'll be very lonely. Good boy. Chu Ho paused, then carried him to Meng Qingxue and said, Come, Xiao Bao, greet Auntie. Little Bean looked at Chu Ho curiously, then at Meng Qingxue. Curious and surprised, he asked, Who is this Auntie? Is she Mommy's guest? Yes. From today onwards, this Auntie will be staying with us. From now on, she'll be our guest. Xiao Bao, you have to be good. Don't be naughty and cause trouble for Auntie. Why would I? Meng Qingxue retorted, How can I cause trouble? I like children. Besides, I'm the one who's causing trouble for you by staying here. Chu Ho looked at her warmly and said, Since you're staying here from now on, let's not treat each other like strangers. Perhaps it was because of their similar experiences, but when the two women looked at each other, there was a sense of mutual appreciation. Meng Qingxue walked in front of her and bent down slightly. She asked Little Bean, What's your name? Little Bean's breathing suddenly quickened. Perhaps it was because he was shy, or perhaps it was because he was embarrassed. Looking at such a delicate and beautiful face in front of him, with a pair of beautiful eyes looking at him, and long eyelashes fluttering, he was so nervous that he stuttered, Ah. Auntie, hello. I'm Xiao Bao Chu. Xiao Bao. What a cute name. From now on, you can call me Auntie Qingxue, okay? Auntie Qingxue. Xiao Bao Chu's eyes suddenly lit up. He asked shyly, Hello Auntie Qingxue. Your name, it's exactly the same as Sister Qingxue's name on TV. Meng Qingxue widened her eyes in curiosity. She was baffled by his words and could not figure out what he meant for a moment. Chu Ho immediately explained, Last year, there was a fantasy drama that was very popular on TV. It was called something like The Legend of Ancient Sword. The female lead was called Qingxue. I see. Xiao Bao Chu suddenly struggled to get down from Chu Ho and ran to the table. Then, he carefully took a clean cup and took out a box of tea from the cabinet. He put a small handful of tea leaves into the cup. Then ran to the kitchen, poured some hot water, and carefully placed the cup on the coffee table in front of the sofa. Then, the little guy ran to Meng Qingxue enthusiastically. He carefully pinched the corner of her shirt and tugged slightly. He said shyly, Auntie, Xiao Bao made you a cup of hot tea. The weather is cold. Drink some hot tea to warm your body. Meng Qingxue was extremely surprised. She looked up at Chu Ho and was a little surprised. You're so young, but you're already so sensible. Auntie, this is what I should do. It's because this is your first time here. You're my guest. Xiao Bao Chu said seriously. The little guy's enthusiasm made Meng Qingxue feel a little embarrassed. She walked over and sat down on the sofa. Xiao Bao Chu stood beside her bashfully and looked at her eagerly. He suddenly reminded her, Auntie, be careful. It's hot. Chapter 25:15. Xiao Bao saw with his own eyes that she picked up the cup and took a sip. Suddenly, she turned around without a word and ran upstairs. Meng Qingxue was dumbfounded. She put down the teacup in a daze and looked at Chu Ho in confusion. She asked curiously, He's so obedient. Did he run upstairs to sleep by himself? That can't be. Chu Ho said, I don't know where this guy gets so much energy from. He's always restless at night. I have to coax him before he'll sleep. Then Chu Ho glanced at the corridor and smiled knowingly. He's probably tidying up your room. Tidying up my room? Yeah. There's a guest room upstairs that's usually reserved for emergencies. He guessed that you'd be staying in that guest room, so he probably took a broom and a mop to tidy it up. Meng Qingxue was even more speechless. He already knows how to do housework. Yeah. Although he doesn't sweep the floor clean, he's very energetic. There's no need to go through so much trouble. I can actually do it myself. Meng Qingxue said as she ran upstairs. When she entered the guest room, she saw Xiaobao struggling to hold a mop and mopping seriously. Under the light, she could see that his forehead was covered in sparkling and fine beads of sweat. He was mopping seriously and was working especially hard. Xiaobao, Auntie knows how to drag. It's already so late. Why don't you sleep early? How can I let Auntie drag? I'm the little master. It's my duty. After Xiaobao finished speaking, he started mopping again with all his might. Meng Qingxue stood at the door and watched with a smile. She couldn't help but lower her head and gently caress her belly. She thought to herself, how nice would it be if the baby in my belly grew up to be so sensible and well-behaved. That would save her a lot of trouble. After the floor was mopped, Chu Ho also packed up and came upstairs. He immediately asked, Xiaobao, are you done mopping the floor? Xiaobao walked over with a mop in his arms. He stood in front of her and saluted her with his little hand. Like a soldier, he said firmly, yes. Mom, it's done. Then go to bed early. Xiaobao suddenly chuckled a few times, then bashfully moved to Chu Ho's side and asked carefully, Mom, seeing that I'm so obedient, can you let me watch another cartoon tonight? It's so late and you're still watching cartoons? Chu Ho's face immediately darkened and he said sternly, not allowed. Go to bed early, okay? Is it really impossible? Xiaobao hugged her thigh pitifully. Looking up at her, she said aggrievedly, just one episode. It was just one episode. Xiaobao took a nap in the afternoon, so I'm not sleepy now. But Mom is tired. After a day of work, I'm very sleepy now. Don't you want to sleep with Mom? Upon hearing Chu Ho's words, Xiaobao didn't insist anymore. Pursing his lips, he nodded and said, then Xiaobao will sleep with Mom. That's a good boy. As Chu Ho said this, he looked up at Meng Qingxue and said, it's late. Go to bed early. Okay. This guest room has a bathroom and hot water. Wash up and rest early. As Chu Ho said this, he closed the door for her. Meng Qingxue placed her luggage on the table and then looked around the room. Chapter 25:16. The furnishings in the house were simple. There was a 2-meter bed, a 5-door wardrobe, a table, and an LCD TV. She walked to the bathroom. Although it was not big, it had everything she needed. There was a shower, a toilet, and a sink. She turned on the tap and hot water immediately came out. Meng Qingxue hung her clothes in the wardrobe. She did not bring many clothes with her. When she was unpacking her luggage, a photo accidentally fell out. She picked it up and glanced at it. It was a selfie of her and Mu Yancheng. She was the one who had dragged Mu Yancheng to take this photo. He was initially unwilling, but she had to act coquettishly before he reluctantly agreed. She pulled the man, who was more than 1.8 meters tall, into the small studio and reluctantly took a photo with her. After that, he refused to take another selfie. In the photo, Mu Yancheng's face was stiff. He reluctantly curved the corners of his lips, looking a little reluctant. Meng Qingxue stared silently at the photo for a long time. Unknowingly, her eyes turned red. Drops of crystal-clear tears fell on the photo and stained it little by little. She pursed her lips and held back her tears. She silently wiped them away. Then, she hardened her heart and gritted her teeth. She pinched the corner of the photo and tore it into pieces in a fit of anger. She hardened her heart and forced herself not to piece together her broken feelings. She grabbed the scattered remains of the photo, rolled them up, and threw them into the wastepaper basket. Meng Qingxue had already taken a shower at the hotel. Hence, she washed her face, brushed her teeth, and went to bed. The next day, when she woke up, Chu Ho had already woken up early. He sent Xiaobao to kindergarten and returned home. Meng Qingxue handed over a sum of money wrapped in an envelope. There's more than 3,000 yuan here. I may have to stay here for a while. Sorry for the trouble. Chu Ho did not refuse and accepted it. Based on their interactions last night, she had a good understanding of Meng Qingshue's character. Meng Qingxue was more principled and strong-willed, which was similar to her in this aspect. If she insisted on not accepting the gift, she would feel a little uncomfortable. After accepting the rent, Chu Ho thought to herself that she could allocate a portion of the money to buy some tonics for her to nourish her body. She could tell that Meng Qingshue's body was not in good condition and needed to be nursed back to health. Fortunately, although Yen City was small, it was a place with beautiful scenery and was very livable. Every household had their own farmland. Therefore, most of the residents in Yen City were self-sufficient. The vegetables and rice they ate were all grown from their own fields. They were very healthy. Meng Qingxue suddenly asked, "Are there any simple jobs in the village? I don't have much money, so I want to do some manual work. Do you know how to do it?" "I've been doing manual work since I was young." Meng Qingshue's family was not considered rich since she was young. Hence, she helped her family do manual work since she was young. She sewed clothes, knitted sweaters, and knitted scarves. Sometimes, she would do some manual work. Chu Ho thought hard for a while and said, "There's a workshop in the village that specializes in making lanterns." "Lanterns?" "Yes. They make handmade lanterns in the shape of various animals and sell them in the market. One lantern costs 15 yuan. If you're fast enough, you can make 10 in a day and earn more than 100 yuan. You can try." "More than 100 yuan." Chapter 25:17. "Sure. My handiwork is very meticulous." Meng Qingxue was greatly excited. "Can you introduce me to it?" "Of course. By the way, don't you have to work in the afternoon?" "I'm on the night shift this week and work at 7 p.m. I'll ask around for you in the afternoon and get back to you." "Okay." In the afternoon, Chu Ho returned home looking very happy. "Qingxue, I've asked around for you. The workshop isn't far from here. It's only a few hundred meters away. However, I was wrong before. It only costs 10 yuan to make a lantern. Are you willing to do it?" 10 yuan is good too. It's a lot. But don't force yourself too much. After all, you're pregnant. Are you having a bad pregnancy reaction now? "A little, I guess." Chu Ho said, "If you're really not feeling well, don't force yourself. I'll help you contact someone later. You can start work tomorrow. They're short of manpower." "Okay." As such, she decided to settle down here. Meng Qingxue went to work at the workshop at 8:30 a.m. sharp every day. Even though it was considered work, the atmosphere was relatively peaceful. Unlike the scheming in the workplace in the metropolis, the villagers were simple and warm. They took special care of an outsider like her. She got the hang of it very quickly. At first, it took her 2 hours to make a lantern. However, after she got the hang of it and familiarized herself with it, she could make 5 lanterns in the morning. She returned home at 7 p.m. after dinner. "Haven't you found her whereabouts yet?" In the office, Mu Yancheng looked at the men in suits standing in a row in front of the table with a displeased expression. On the table was a thick stack of information about Meng Qingxue. Everything about her, from her background to her DNA, was in the file. However, after half a month, he had sent countless people to search for her, but they could not find a single strand of her hair. This woman was too ruthless. She left without leaving a trace. It was as if she had evaporated into thin air. Mu Yancheng hated her so much that he gritted his teeth. The more he loved this woman, the more he hated her. Why did she leave? She left without saying a word after leaving such a message. She made it seem like he was the one who chased her away. Why was he talking to himself like that? Who gave her the right to do so? The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. With a cold expression, he picked up the documents on the table and slammed them on the floor. "Chairman Mu, please calm down. We've already sent out our best men to search for him. However, to find one person in so many cities was indeed a little tricky. However, if they continued to search, they would definitely be able to find her whereabouts. Don't worry, we will definitely find him for you. The reason why they addressed him as Chairman Mu was that the news of him taking up the position of Dishing Financial Group's CEO had been publicly announced this morning. When Mu Yancheng walked into the Mu Group's building, all the Mu Group's employees addressed him respectfully as Chairman Mu. As for the inheritance ceremony, it would be held in a week's time. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Come in. A woman who looked like a secretary suddenly walked in and reported with a smile, Chairman Mu, Miss Song is looking for you. We have arranged for her to wait for you in the reception room. Chapter 25:18. Miss Song. Which Miss Song? It's your fiancée, Miss Song Enya. Mu Yancheng was stunned for a moment as he muttered inwardly, what is she doing here at this time? Just tell her that I'm busy and can't meet her. He was currently feeling frustrated and did not want to be disturbed by that woman. Then, the secretary cautiously said, I'll tell her that you have a meeting to prepare for later. Yes, just say that. The secretary then retreated respectfully. Unexpectedly, a few minutes later, the sound of high heels clicking could be heard from outside the door. Without knocking, Song Enya pushed the door open and rushed in. She said rudely, meeting. What meeting is so important that even I can't be seen? Mu Yancheng raised his head and frowned, looking displeased. Didn't I say that I'm busy now? Can't you wait until I'm off work? Do you have to avoid me like this? Could it be that, in your eyes, I'm some kind of scourge? Annoyed, Mu Yancheng turned his face away and refused to look at her. I have something to talk to you about. What is it that you have to talk about in the office? We only talk about business in the office and not private matters. She was instantly enraged when she heard this and took a step forward agitatedly. Mu Yancheng, what kind of attitude is this? Listen to me carefully. Song Enya's words came to an abrupt halt as her gaze landed on the scattered papers on the floor. Curiously, she walked forward and picked up one of them, only to see Meng Qingshue's photo on it. It was actually information about Meng Qingxue. Her heart skipped a beat as she felt extremely humiliated. What is this for? Could it be that this man sent people to look for me? Song Enya skimmed through the documents and, in shock, picked up a few more. Glancing through them, she was surprised to find that the investigation had included the hospital. Hospital? What kind of situation would require them to investigate the hospital? Could it be? Song Enya immediately thought of a possibility. This woman is pregnant. Pregnant? Then, isn't this woman a big threat to me? To rich families, a woman's birth was not the biggest threat. The biggest threat came from the child in her stomach. She had plenty of means to make it difficult for this woman to step into the Mu family for the rest of her life. However, the child in her stomach might not be. If she was pregnant and gave birth to the child, once Mu Yancheng found the child and brought it back to the Mu family, the most terrifying thing was that if the child in her stomach was a boy, the threat to her would be infinitely increased. She's pregnant? Song Enya questioned her with the document in her hand. Is she pregnant with your child? Her words were aggressive and extremely sharp. Mu Yancheng was extremely displeased with the way she was questioning him. It was as if she were interrogating a criminal. Therefore, when he spoke, his tone was not that friendly. My matters have nothing to you. You are my fiancé. How can your matters have nothing to do with me? Chapter 25:19. With that, she took a step forward and ordered, you must abort the child in her womb. Who are you to question the Mu family's child? How can you abort it just like that? Song Enya originally thought that with her strong tone and attitude, he would definitely compromise a little in front of her. Unexpectedly, he gave her an order back. No. What? She laughed in anger. Mu Yancheng, don't tell me you're planning to wait for this woman to give birth to the child and then bring this unknown B***st**RD back to the Mu family? Unknown B***st**RD. He sneered and retorted, how can it be an unknown B***st**RD? The blood of the Mu family is not a B***st**RD. The child in her womb is my flesh and blood, it's my seed. It's not up to you to decide whether this child stays or goes. Are you so sure that this B***ST**RD is yours? Song Enya provoked him in an extremely sinister manner. Meng Qingxue is a young model. Do you think she's that pure in the filthy entertainment industry? Do you think she's that innocent? Who knows if she's been entangled with other men behind your back? I heard that her circle is very messy. She can sleep for a few nights with just a few tens of thousands of yuan. How can you be so sure that the child in her stomach is yours? Mu Yanqing was thoroughly provoked by her. He slammed the table and stood up abruptly. Pointing at her nose, he rebuked, I've said it before. You have no right to interfere in my affairs. Besides, you're not married yet, so you're not considered a member of the Mu family. What right do you have to tell me what to do? Song Enya, haven't you figured out your identity yet? Song Enya was about to retort when someone knocked on the door again. Mu Yanqing was annoyed and bellowed, who is it? It's me. A calm voice came from outside the door. Come in. Just as he finished speaking, the door was pushed open and Minyu, who was dressed casually, walked into the office with a stack of reports in his hand. Mu Yanqing looked at him and asked coldly, what's the matter? Master Yanqing. Mu Yanqing cut him off coldly. Are you blind? Didn't you see Mu Group's announcement today? From today onwards, I am officially the CEO of Disheng. According to the rules, you should call me Chairman Mu. In the Mu Group, we have to be clear about etiquette, and we have to be clear about who is superior and who is inferior. Minyu shot him a frosty look. Instead of his usual suit, he was dressed in casual attire today. He walked up to Mu Yanqing and nonchalantly tossed a stack of reports on the table. Mu Yanqing glared at him and then followed his action to look at the reports on the table. He asked quizzically, what's this? This is my resignation letter. The Human Resource Department said that my resignation letter needs your approval. After saying that, he put on a nonchalant expression, and his gaze was light and indifferent. Young Master Yanqing, I've said before that the day you officially succeed your position will be the day I leave the Mu Group. I'm here to ask for your resignation. Chapter 25-20. Minyu looked at him with indifference. There was not a hint of reluctance on his face. It was not that he did not have any feelings for the Mu Group. From the day he became Mu Yaja's special assistant, he had sworn that he would not leave this place unless the Mu Group collapsed. However, since Mu Yaja was no longer with the company, there was no point for him to stay. His loyalty had never been for the Mu Group, it was only for Mu Yaja. Song Enya was also stunned. She was no stranger to Minyu. When she first met him, he was merely an administrative assistant by Mu Yaja's side. He was the confidant whom the latter had promoted all the way to the top. He was loyal to Mu Yaja, so she was not surprised to see him resign. Mu Yanqing glared fiercely at his assistant. After sizing him up, he suddenly sneered and said contemptuously, Mu Yaja, you've raised a loyal and good dog. Minyu did not seem to take his blatant humiliation to heart. Instead, he said expressionlessly, it doesn't matter if he's a good dog or not. Even a dog will recognize its master. Besides, a good dog will only recognize a good master. Without waiting for Minyu to finish, Mu Yanqing continued coldly, what if I refuse to sign this report? Minyu said unhurriedly, then, I'll unilaterally terminate my contract with your company. Mu Yanqing's eyes widened in surprise. With a look of disbelief, he laughed in anger. What did you say? It doesn't matter if you sign this contract or not. If you don't sign it, you'll be dealt with according to your company's rules and regulations. Any employee of the Mu Group who is absent from work for 5 days will be dealt with accordingly. After saying that, Minyu paused and nodded elegantly. With a smile, he said, Young Master Yanqing, I'll take my leave now. With a faint smile, he turned around expressionlessly and walked toward the door without looking back. He did not seem to care about Mu Yanqing's ashen face as he turned to leave. Mu Yanqing's face instantly turned red. No matter how elegant he was, he could not maintain his composure at this moment. He growled, "Stop right there. Did I say you could leave?" Unexpectedly, Minyu didn't even turn his head. It was as if he didn't hear him at all. He opened the door and left. Bang! The door slammed shut with a loud bang. The muscles on Mu Yanqing's face twitched for a moment. His gaze was sinister and ferocious as he gritted his teeth and turned around. Glancing at the resignation letter on the table, he picked it up abruptly, tore it into shreds, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it into the trash can. Song Enya watched his every move and let out a long snort before saying, "Mu Yanqing, you haven't answered my question yet. What are you going to do with that Meng Qingxue?" At this moment, she was still angry because of what had happened to Meng Qingxue. She initially thought that she was just a woman who was clinging on to Mu Yanqing. She had experienced how flirtatious the man could be. She was also aware that this man had many women outside. Some were models, some were from the entertainment industry, and some were even students. However, this was not the most infuriating thing. What was more infuriating was that after Meng Qingxue left under her instigation, Mu Yanqing actually went to great lengths to find her. What did this mean? This meant that Mu Yanqing valued Meng Qingxue very much. Chapter 25-21. A man who had always been a womanizer was actually pursuing a woman who had disappeared without a trace. This was definitely not purely because that woman was pregnant with his child. She was also pregnant. She was also pregnant with his child, and she was certain that it was a boy. However, Mu Yanqing did not care about her at all from the start. He did not even care about her at all. What about Meng Qingxue, though? Mu Yanqing was secretly looking for that woman's whereabouts behind her back. She would never allow such a thing to happen. Mu Yanqing did not immediately respond to her doubts, but Song Enya did not have the patience to wait for his reply. Suddenly, she walked over expressionlessly and faced him. "Mu Yanqing, let me tell you, I have my bottom line, too. Don't think that the Song family can be bullied just because it's a little down now. Let me tell you, since I'm your fiancé and married to you, then Meng Qingxue is not allowed to exist. No matter where she goes, you're not allowed to look for her whereabouts. If you still care about my feelings, I'll have to trouble you to quietly kill the child in her womb. I, Song Enya, am not that easy to bully." Mu Yanqing suddenly laughed eerily and said coldly, "Song Enya, you're really naive. Do you think that you have the right to control me just because you're my fiancé in name? Dream on." "What?" Song Enya looked sullen. "Mu Yanqing, I control you. I'm controlling you. I'm just defending my rights as your future wife. I'm protecting my legal rights." Mu Yanqing immediately interrupted her impatiently. "We haven't even collected our marriage certificate, so how can it be legal? Besides, what I hate the most is the way you talk about your selfishness as if it's the most righteous thing you've ever done." Mu Yanqing paused for a moment before continuing. "You can't tolerate Qingxue because you're worried that her existence will threaten your position as the Mu family's young madam? You don't have to worry about this at all. Here, I want to tell you that regardless of whether Meng Qingxue is here or not, whether you can find her or not, in my heart, you are not even worthy of carrying her shoes. In my heart, you're not even fit to carry her shoes." Upon hearing that, Song Enya felt as if her heart had received a heavy blow. It was as if a sharp needle had pierced her chest, causing her to feel excruciating pain. Her face turned as pale as white wax. Her lips trembled for a while, and she took a quick breath. She gritted her teeth and asked, "Not even fit to carry his shoes? Mu Yanqing, do you really mean it?" Mu Yanqing snorted disapprovingly as his lips curled into a mocking smile. "Do you think I'm joking with you? Or do you think I'm as hypocritical as you?" With that, he ignored her and instructed the new assistants, "Clean this place up. I have something to do and need to go out." He had promoted 2 of his confidants to be his assistants the moment he took office. It had to be said that Mu Yaja was very arrogant and powerful. Mu Yaja only had Minyu by his side, but he felt that one was not enough. Since he was now the supreme leader of the Mu group, he needed at least 5 assistants by his side to reflect his aura. Chapter 25-22. Seeing that he was about to leave, Song Enya chased after him and tried to tug at his sleeve. "Where are you going?" Mu Yanqing did not even look at her as he flung her hand away. Song Enya was furious and shouted hysterically, "Stop right there." Mu Yanqing turned around abruptly and glared at her fiercely. "Song Enya, I'm warning you, we're in the company now. You must remember your place and don't act like a crazy woman. You'll embarrass the Mu and Song families." Song Enya was so angry that her chest was heaving up and down. Her eyes were red and swollen. Ever since she became pregnant, her emotions were easily out of control. She was no longer as calm and stable as before and often had hysterical outbursts. She forced herself to calm down and suddenly asked in a trembling voice, "Mu Yanqing, do you treat me as your fiancé or not?" "Of course." Mu Yanqing's voice was cold. "You're my fiancé. This is an undeniable fact. Since I've acknowledged you, I won't deny your value. Then, what right do you have to treat me like this?" Song Enya widened her eyes as tears streamed down her cheeks. Why was it so difficult to find a man who would dote on her? First, it was Mu Yaja. Now, it was Mu Yanqing. None of them had ever cared about her. Only God knew how jealous she was of Yun Shishir to be doted on like that. What about her? For a single favor, she felt like she was a beggar, pitifully begging for pity, but what she got in return was still disdain. Song Enya could not figure it out. She questioned him word by word, "What right do you have? What right do you have to care so much about a lowly woman?" Mu Yanqing was silent for a while. Suddenly, Meng Qingshue's voice and face appeared in his mind. He recalled the times when she lay aggrievedly on his chest and would occasionally throw a tantrum willfully. At that time, he felt that this woman was very much like a child, adorable and arrogant. He recalled that when he was unwell, she took care of him day and night, staying by his bedside and taking good care of him. At that time, he felt the radiance of motherhood and maturity from her. Mu Yanqing could not help curling his lips into a smile as he calmly said, "Based on the fact that she treats me wholeheartedly, she'll never scheme against me like you did." With that, he pushed the door open and left without another look at the Missy. Song Enya stood rooted to the ground in a daze, suddenly having an epiphany. It turned out that this man probably still hadn't gotten over the fact that she had schemed against him and used him. She fell to the ground in a daze as she stared blankly in the direction where Mu Yanqing had left. Tears fell silently from her eyes. With Mu Linfeng's support, Mu Yanqing's promotion was a matter of course. Mu Linfeng was extremely prestigious in the Mu family. After Mu Yaja left the Mu group, his words carried the most weight in the family. On the night before the announcement was made, Mu Yanqing tossed and turned restlessly in bed. His heart was heavy, and he was so agitated and uneasy that he could not fall asleep. Perhaps it was because he felt that the good thing he had been dreaming of all this time had come too suddenly that he could not help but doubt the authenticity of this matter. He even wondered if he was having a long and sweet dream. Once his sweet dream was shattered and he woke up from it, the Mu family would still be under Mu Yaja's control. Chapter 25-23. Perhaps, this was not a dream, but in his imagination, the succession ceremony would probably not be carried out successfully. Someone would definitely make things difficult for him. However, on this day, the succession ceremony was held as scheduled. During the shareholders' meeting, he officially became the new president of the Mu Group under the witness of all the important members of the Mu family and the senior shareholders of the company. After the meeting, he walked into his office. The originally luxurious CEO's office had been cleaned up to look brand new, and the name tag on the table had been replaced with his name. It was only then that an indescribable heat surged from his chest like a dream. He had finally gotten what he wanted. He had become the real head of the Mu Group. He knew very well that, although he was the head of the company on the surface, the real power was still in the hands of Mu Linfeng. However, there was no hurry in this matter. Mu Linfeng's body was no longer as strong as it used to be. When he was no longer around, the real power would return to him, would it not? He was finally at ease. With this, he could finally satisfy the surging desire in his heart. He did not sit in the office for long. Instead, he left the office to patrol the employees' area. As he walked through the rows of employees' work areas, the gazes of the elites in suits and leather shoes that he met changed from the initial disdain and suspicion to the current reverence and subservience. He could feel the eagerness and flattery on the faces of the employees wherever he looked. This was probably the charm of power, right? Everyone would bow down to him and respect him. No one dared to disobey his will. Therefore, many people in the Mu family wanted to climb up the ladder by hook or by crook. They coveted this position for no other reason than to stand at the peak and be worshipped and looked up to by everyone. Standing at the peak, one would realize that when one looked down at them, everyone would be as insignificant as a speck of dust or an ant. He seemed to be able to flatten them at will. He had waited so long for this moment. Now, he finally got what he wanted. At the thought of this, Mu Yancheng wanted to laugh out loud without restraint, but his rationality restrained him from doing so. In the end, he managed to maintain his composure as he returned to the CEO's office. After the Mu Group's stock market plunged, although there were doubts about Mu Yancheng's succession, most of them regarded him as their savior. However, many senior and elite employees did not have much confidence in Mu Yancheng. If it was in the past, when Mu Yaja was in charge of the Mu Group, none of the financial groups in the world could compete with the Mu Group. However, things were different now. Mu Yaja left the Mu Group and took over the position of president of the Xingyu Financial Group with great fanfare. He made a beautiful comeback with great fanfare. Now, he was ambitious and rapidly rising in power. He had become the leader of the Xingqiu Financial Group. This was simply a miracle. Apart from Mu Yaja, no one else would be able to create such a miracle. The Xingyu Financial Group, the existence that the Mu Group loved and hated, was now the biggest enemy of the Mu Group. Chapter 25-24. The reason why they said they loved and hated him was because the person in charge of Xingyu was the leader of the Mu Group whom they had always respected and looked up to. What they hated was that every time Xingyu made a move, it was undoubtedly to destroy the Mu Group's future. The ruthlessness of his moves was jaw-dropping. Mu Linfeng once thought pessimistically that the will of this chess piece had finally recovered. From now on, he was probably light years away from the end of his era. Perhaps, there would never be an end to it. This was because he knew very well that his son, Yun Tianyu, was not a kind person and was not of his kind. At such a young age, he had already made a name for himself. His future was simply incredible. Checkmate. In the hotel suite, Yu placed his chess piece down with the conceit of a victor on his face. Mu Yaja furrowed his brows and looked at the proud little lad opposite him. He heard Yu say smugly and disdainfully, "Daddy, you've lost again. TSK, TSK. You have to admit that you're old." This lad was asking for a beating. How dare he tease his old man? Could he leave him some face? Yun Shishir was watching the game from the side with Xiao Yichen in her arms. When she saw the final result, she was not surprised and laughed out loud. "Hubby, you're no match for Yu at all." That's right, that's right. Daddy, you should give up struggling. Yu is the back wave, and you're the front wave. He has already knocked you down to the beach. Mu Yaja glared at him, and the latter immediately shut up. He threw himself into Yun Shishir's arms aggrievedly and called out pitifully, "Mommy, Daddy is scolding me again." Yu said earnestly, "Daddy, don't be unwilling to admit defeat. Give up struggling. Your chess skills are not as good as mine." Mu Yaja said awkwardly, "I haven't played in a long time. I'm a little rusty." "Don't make excuses for your failure." Yu educated him seriously. "Even if you lose, you have to admit defeat gracefully. That's what a gentleman is." Mu Yaja gritted his teeth at her words. Oh my God. He really wanted to beat this kid up. Asking for a beating. All right. It's getting late. Yun Shishir looked at the sky outside the window. It was 10 p.m. in Prague. It was time to rest early. We still have to fly to Italy tomorrow. Yu Yu immediately hugged Yun Shirshir and said coquettishly, I want to sleep with mommy. Xiao Yichen immediately hugged Yun Shirshir, unwilling to let go. I want to sleep with mommy too. Mu Yaja walked over, pinched each of them by their ears, and pulled them away. Sleep on your own. Don't hoard my woman. This domineering declaration was very much his style. Yun Shirshir's lips twitched. Every night, the father-son trio would fight over her as scheduled. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen would fight to sleep with her, but in the end, Mu Yaja would kick them away in disdain. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen covered their ears and complained bitterly, Daddy is bullying us. Pinching ears is domestic violence. We want to protest. When I was your age, I was already independent. Why are you so clingy? Humph. Humph. The two little kids snorted in unison and looked at him with disdain. Yu Yu suddenly said, forget it. Mu Yichen, we won't stoop to his level. With that, he held Mu Yichen's hand and strode out of the room. He did not even look back, he was very suave. Chapter 25-25. You're spoiling them too much. Mu Yaja was still in a bad mood. After all, he had lost 3 rounds to his son in less than 10 minutes. Naturally, he would not be in a good mood. They're a little clingy. Mu Yaja said, quickly get them to find a wife. That way, they won't have to stick to my wife. Yun Shirshir's eyes twitched. Are you serious? Why? They're only 7 years old. Was he looking for a child bride? Yun Shirshir suddenly walked over to the sofa, sat down beside him, and hugged his shoulders. Today, the director called to ask when I'll be returning to the set. It seems that the wedding photo shoot has delayed some time. I only applied for 5 days off, but I didn't expect the schedule to be so tight. 5 days isn't enough. Mu Yaja gently stroked her hair and said unhurriedly, there's no need to rush back to the set since the filming is going on. After all, the wedding photo shoot is more important than filming. Then, is your schedule tight? Yun Shirshir asked worriedly. Your schedule should be even tighter than mine. Xingyu is still waiting for you to rush back to take charge, right? I've made arrangements in advance. If there's anything, Jinyu will take care of it. Oh, Yun Shirshir pondered for a moment before suddenly saying, I saw the news today. Mu Yanqing has officially taken over the position of Dishing Financial Group's CEO. Do you know about this? Mu Yaja appeared indifferent. It's not something to be concerned about. I'm worried that the Mu Group will make a bold move against Xingyu Financial Group and launch a series of counterattacks. The business world is filled with gunpowder all the time. There's no difference whether there's one more enemy or one less. Besides, Mu Linfeng is now in charge of the Mu family. They're already at their wits' end. You, on the other hand, don't have to worry so much. Mu Yaja lowered his head and could not help but give her a light peck on the lips. Then, he smiled and said, you're here for the wedding photo shoot. Why are you worrying about this and that? I'm worried for you. I know what I'm doing. If I'm not confident, I won't act. Since I've left Mu Group, I'm confident that I can trample Mu Group under my feet. After he finished speaking, he looked at her face and his gaze became gentler. Under the light, her beautiful face was bright and beautiful. His heart was moved by her moving eyes and he couldn't help but move closer to her. His thin lips covered her delicate lips and kissed her charmingly, but there was a hidden ambition. Under the gentleness, it was as if he wanted to swallow her into his stomach like a tiger eyeing its prey. Yun Shirshir followed her instincts and responded to his kiss. He suddenly picked her up and walked towards the bed. The next day, there was a 9 a.m. flight to Italy. This was the last part of the wedding photo shoot schedule. It was also Yun Shirshir's most anticipated destination. Italy. As she waited to board the plane, she was filled with anticipation. They arrived at the airport as scheduled. After arriving in Italy, they got into the car specially sent by the hotel to pick them up. However, halfway through the journey, the road was suddenly congested. For some reason, the traffic in Italy was convenient and there were rarely traffic jams, but now, it was so congested that it was difficult to move half a meter. Muyaja glanced at his watch, looking extremely displeased. He then asked in fluent Italian, "Why is there a traffic jam?" Chapter 25-26. The driver was surprised because Muyaja's Italian was too fluent. If it wasn't for his handsome face, he would have thought that he was a native of Italy. "Honorable sir, I'm not sure either. We've been stuck in traffic for 5 minutes. What's going on in front?" Muyaja suddenly said to the hotel manager in the front passenger seat, "Go down and see what's going on." "Yes, sir." The blonde hotel manager immediately got out of the car and walked forward to investigate the situation. Yun Shishir sat in the back seat. After waiting for a long time in the traffic jam, she couldn't help but feel a little sleepy and yawned a few times. Muyaja glanced at her and asked, "Sleepy?" "Yeah, a little." Yun Shishir couldn't help but blush. She complained, "Didn't you not rest well last night?" This energetic man had tormented her until midnight before he finally stopped. She didn't know where he got his strong physical strength from. He slept later than her, but he was still full of energy and didn't look tired at all. Or was it because her stamina was too weak? Her physical fitness wasn't bad, but compared to this inhuman, it wasn't worth mentioning. Muyaja couldn't help but smirk. He asked, "Are you blaming me?" Yun Shishir's face turned even redder. She said angrily, "Who else can I blame if not you? It's all your fault. You were very passionate last night. You wanted it so much. I was just trying to satisfy you." Muyaja said righteously. Yun Shishir's face was so red that it was about to bleed. She couldn't help but say angrily, "What do you mean? What do you mean I was passionate too? It was clearly you." Muyaja saw that she was hesitating to speak. Her expression was incomparably bashful, as if she was too embarrassed to say anything. He could not help but want to hear it. He inched closer to her and pressed on. "It's clearly me." "What about me?" "I'm not talking about it." "Why aren't you talking about it?" Muyaja teased her on purpose. "It's clearly me. What's wrong with that?" Yun Shishir glared at him coquettishly. "What do you mean what happened? How could such a man force her?" He was clearly trying to tease her and embarrass her. Last night, it was clear that he wanted more and more, as if it wasn't enough. There were several times when she begged for mercy, wanted to stop, protested repeatedly, and expressed that she was tired. However, he didn't know fatigue and worked hard on her body, tormenting her until she felt like her entire body was about to fall apart. In the end, she collapsed on the bed in exhaustion. Her entire body went limp, and in the end, she could not move at all. Wasn't it all because of him? How was she supposed to say these words? Yun Shishir glared at him again and again, her heart full of resentment. Muyaja silently cursed in his heart. If he didn't work harder to sow the seeds, where would the daughter he longed for come from? He wholeheartedly hoped that her belly would be able to work harder and give birth to a little princess for him. Only then did he put this matter into practice. This man was the most black-bellied. He knew that this woman would take certain contraceptive measures and would take pills before doing it. Hence, he tampered with her long-acting contraceptive pills and replaced the pills in the box with folic acid. Chapter 25-27. This stupid girl was still kept in the dark until now. Muyaja couldn't help but want to laugh when he imagined the day when she realized that she was pregnant and holding the diagnosis report in her hand. However, he held it in. Besides, he had some selfish motives. If she was pregnant, she would have no reason to continue working in the entertainment industry. When the time came, he would set up an entertainment company for her to manage. When she was in a good mood, she would take on a few good scripts. It would be very relaxing. Although his methods were a little despicable, this woman didn't cooperate. The hotel manager returned quickly and got into the car. He said to Muyaja, "Sir, I went to check on the situation. There was an accident and two cars collided." Car accident? Yes, it was a collision. The police are on their way. The road will be clear soon. Muyaja nodded and gently pulled Yun Shishir into his arms. He asked gently, "Are you tired?" "Yes, a little. I'm just afraid that the two little guys are tired from the flight." The hotel sent two cars to pick them up. Yu and Mui Chen sat in the car behind. At this moment, they were most likely dozing off. The road was clear again. The car moved slowly. When they passed by the scene, they saw a Bentley and a Maserati colliding. Yun Shishir couldn't help but take another look. By the side of the road, a woman with brown hair and black eyes was standing face to face with a uniformed police officer. They seemed to be cooperating with the investigation. The woman had an Eastern face. She was exquisite and beautiful, especially her eyes. They were as delicate as a painting. Her willow leaf-like eyebrows were gentle and reserved. Nowadays, very few people drew such eyebrows. Most of the people had a Korean-style unibrow, but few people were interested in willow eyebrows. However, this woman was very suitable for willow eyebrows. It made her almond-shaped eyes charming. She had a high nose bridge and pink cherry lips. Her facial features might not be shockingly exquisite if they were separated separately, but when put together, they were extremely harmonious and beautiful. Moreover, they were extremely recognizable and unforgettable. Perhaps it was because she was particularly interested in beautiful things. For some reason, Yun Shishir paid special attention to her and couldn't help but glance at her. The woman seemed a little annoyed and frustrated. She raised her hand to look at her watch and subconsciously glanced up. The car sent by the hotel to pick her up brushed past her. For some reason, she couldn't help but glance at the car window. The car window was rolled down. Therefore, he could see the person sitting in the back seat at a glance. The woman's face suddenly stiffened and her gaze paused for a moment. Immediately after, an extremely surprised and suspicious expression surfaced on her face. She couldn't help but chase after the car for a few steps. When she clearly saw the man sitting in the back seat of the car, she was shocked and couldn't help but take a step forward. She was wearing high heels, but she didn't seem to care at all as she chased after the car. Yun Shishir had already retracted her gaze, but when she looked up, she saw in the rearview mirror that the exquisite-looking woman was chasing after the car. She was waving her hands, and her hair was messed up by the wind. Her red lips were slightly open as if she was shouting something. However, sitting in the car, she couldn't hear anything at all. Yun Shishir muttered in puzzlement, "That's weird. Why is this woman chasing after the car?" Chapter 25-28. Muyaja raised his eyebrows and did not catch her muttering. "What? There's a woman chasing after our car." Yun Shishir then added, "It's really strange. I don't know if she's mistaken me for someone else." Hearing this, Muyaja looked in the rearview mirror, too. The woman was nowhere to be seen. "There's no one. It can't be. I saw her chasing after us just now." Yun Shishir looked at the rearview mirror curiously, but the woman was nowhere to be seen. "Maybe she's not chasing after us." As she spoke, she gently rested her head on his shoulder. The car sped away at lightning speed. "Miss, are you okay?" On the road, the brown-haired woman lay on the ground and looked at the back view of the car. She bit her lip and hit the ground hard. She was a little angry. Coincidentally, she was wearing high heels today. Running all the way here, she sprained her ankle in a panic. She fell heavily on the ground. She panicked and wanted to chase after the car, but it was already far away. She only remembered the car plate number. She propped herself up slowly and stood up slightly. There was a graze on her knee and a layer of skin on her heel had been scraped off by the edge of her high heels. The police officer ran up and helped her up. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. It's just a graze." As the woman spoke, she raised her head and smiled at him. "Officer, can I trouble you to check a license plate number for me?" The police officer looked hesitant. If it was an ordinary person who made such a request, he would definitely reject it firmly. However, the woman in front of him was the ambassador of country Z's embassy in Italy. Her father was a well-known Chinese entrepreneur in Italy and her mother was the chief diplomat of the embassy. She had a prominent background. It was not easy to reject her request. The woman smiled at him and said politely, "Thank you, officer." When the car arrived at the hotel, the bellman carried the luggage into the room. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir carried Mu Yichen and Yu Yu into the luxurious suite. The two little fellows did not wake up even when they were held in the arms of the two people. After such a long journey, they were already exhausted. Lying on the two people's shoulders, they closed their eyes and fell asleep. Mu Yaja deliberately did not wake them up. They had flown all the way from Prague to Italy. Besides the time difference, they were exhausted. Anyway, they did not have any plans for the night. Mu Yaja planned to settle the two little guys down before going to the opera with Yun Shishir. Italian opera was world famous. Yun Shishir had been thinking about it for a long time. As a husband, how could he not fulfill his wife's small wish? After entering the hotel, Mu Yaja carried the two little guys to the bed. During this time, Yu Yu woke up once and struggled to get up. However, Mu Yaja saw that he was very sleepy and coaxed him back to sleep. Taking advantage of the time when the two little guys finally stopped sleeping, he made love with her again. After the romantic moment, he carried her to the shower room and served her a warm and hot bath. After she was done, Yun Shishir took the hairdryer to him and said coquettishly, "Help me dry my hair." Okay. He would not reject any request that could be fulfilled. Chapter 25-29. He took the hairdryer and had just turned it on when he heard the doorbell ringing. Ding dong, ding dong. Yun Shishir looked out the door in surprise and asked with a strange expression, "Who is it?" "It's probably room service." "Yeah." Mu Yaja winked at her mysteriously. "I've prepared a candlelight dinner just for you." Yun Shishir was stunned for a while and said shyly, "It's so romantic." "I'll go get the door. Wait for me here." Mu Yaja hugged her and kissed her cheek before turning to leave the shower room. Yun Shishir picked up the hairdryer and blew herself dry. Her heart was as sweet as honey. This man really knew how to be romantic sometimes. Time and time again, he surprised her. From the proposal to the engagement, and now to the wedding photo shoot, this originally rigid and dull man seemed to have been enlightened overnight. The romantic cells in his body seemed to have been revived, and he knew how to flirt with her occasionally. This was a huge improvement. Just as she was immersed in the romantic fantasy of a candlelight dinner, she suddenly realized that he had taken too long to open the door. Curious about the candlelight dinner, she put down the hairdryer and tiptoed out of the shower room. However, just as she walked to the entrance, she saw a scene that made her freeze. Mu Yaja, dressed in a black bathrobe, stood at the door with his back facing her. In front of him was a brown-haired woman who had thrown herself into his embrace. Her arms were tightly wrapped around his waist. Her fingers were long and slender, but due to the tight embrace, her knuckles had turned white. Mu Yaja finally came to his senses after being in a daze for a long time. He frowned and took a while to realize who the woman in his arms was. They had not seen each other for a long time, and he couldn't even call out her full name. In his hazy memory, the girl's warm and clear face floated to his mind. He couldn't help but follow his memory and silently said a name, Xian, brother Zhe. The woman buried her face in his chest, and a warm current flowed down along the lines of his muscles. "I miss you so much," the woman cried emotionally. "I thought that I would never be able to see you again in this life." Hearing this, Mu Yaja's expression changed. Suddenly, the corners of his lips curled up, and he couldn't help but sigh dotingly. "Silly. Haven't we met?" Yun Shishir's face stiffened. She didn't know how to deal with such a situation. Who was this woman? He heard her call him brother Zhe, and he called her Xian, Could it be that they already knew each other? However, why did she feel that this woman's attitude towards him was somewhat unusual? Yun Shishir looked at her hands that were tightly wrapped around his waist. Only when the woman raised her head and saw her familiar face did Yun Shishir realize who this woman was. Isn't that the brown-haired woman from this afternoon? Because her facial features were very unique and beautiful, it was unforgettable. She had a head of brown hair that made her look pure and sweet. Her palm-sized oval face was fair, and she had on light and elegant makeup. It wasn't too bright, but it was fresh and refined. It was just right. Ah, how could she forget that this was the woman who had chased after their car? Chapter 25:30. Could it be that he saw an old friend in the car at first glance? A dinner car was parked beside the woman, and the candlelight on it was constantly swaying. It was romantic and charming. Contrasting with their backs, she felt an inexplicable discomfort in her heart. Yun Shishir suddenly felt a little embarrassed. She called out softly, "Honey." Mu Yaja's back stiffened. He suddenly came back to his senses and gently pushed the woman away. Yun Shishir noticed that his movements were gentle and soft, as if he was afraid that it would be too abrupt. It could be seen that although he was unprepared for the woman's sudden hug, he did not reject it. Her heart suddenly fell to the bottom of the valley. The doubts in her heart were infinitely magnified. He turned around and saw her. He immediately walked up to her and said in a deep voice, "Why are you out in a bathrobe? Aren't you cold? I saw you open the door for so long and didn't come in, so I was a little worried. Go in first and come out after you change." Yun Shishir did not respond to him immediately. Instead, she looked at the woman at the door in confusion. "This is..." Mu Yaja turned around and glanced at the woman standing at the door, who looked a little uneasy. Under the woman's smiling gaze, he said softly, "An old friend." "An old friend?" "Yes, Rong Xian. She immigrated to Italy when she was 12. Mu Yaja paused, hugged Yun Shishir, and introduced her to the woman. Xian, let me introduce you. This is my wife, Yun Shishir. This is my wife, Yun Shishir." She noticed that his tone and adjectives were intimate, gentle, and affectionate. In a way that made her jealous and envious, he introduced the unidentified woman beside him to her. "Wife? Is he married?" "Wife." She had thought that at his age, he would not be married. When Rong Xian heard this unfamiliar word, she staggered slightly and almost lost the smile on her face. Her eyes, which had been full of anticipation, were now full of disappointment. She had thought that this woman was his woman. Women are different from wives. There were countless possibilities for women. They were born out of love, but they had nothing to do with love. However, the identity of his wife was different. Based on her understanding of this man, his wife represented the woman he had chosen in his long life. When she first saw the man sitting in the back seat in the afternoon, her mind went blank for a second. Before her brain could react, her body had already made a conditioned reflex action. She couldn't help but start walking and chase after the car. Mu Yaja. Originally, she thought that this name would fade away from her life. However, in this unexpected encounter, she inadvertently saw that mature and shockingly handsome face. No matter how many years passed, it still could not wash away that handsome face that was deeply engraved in her memory. The adoration that was hidden in his heart was something that he had purposely tried not to think about and tried to forget. However, as they met again, countless burning emotions suddenly surged in his chest. That adoration was revived once again. Madness. Mu Yaja, this name was the most unforgettable memory of her childhood. Chapter 25:31. Using the car plate number that she had memorized, she quickly found out his whereabouts and chased him all the way to the hotel. However, she bumped into the candlelight banquet that was being delivered. The moment the waiter knocked on the door, she stood at the door. The long wait and nervousness made her feel a little helpless. She had originally thought that she would probably never see him again in this lifetime. However, this unexpected encounter made her believe that it was a fated meeting and fate. Therefore, she chased after him regardless of the consequences. With a burning passion, the moment the door opened, she pounced on him and tightly hugged his lean body that she hadn't seen in a long time, refusing to let go. Brother Zha. The memory of his youth, she called softly, trying to rouse his distant memory. The hand that was about to push her away suddenly froze. She knew that this man had recognized her. Oh my God. He still hadn't forgotten her. This realization made her jump with joy. However, just as happiness surged in her heart, the next second, it was completely shattered by this introduction. This is my wife. What a formal introduction. The dream that had been surging in her heart was completely shattered because of this introduction. However, such a line was extremely in line with this man's style of doing things. He was swift and decisive, never dragging his feet. Once he had set his mind on something, he would be stubborn to the end. This man was very smart, so smart that it was unsettling. From just now, she had felt the change in this man's expression. From the initial confusion to the gradual realization, and then to the final smile and acceptance. However, vaguely, he still maintained a distance from her. This estrangement was due to his deep understanding of his current identity. He was a man with a family, a wife and children whom he loved dearly, and a blissful life. Therefore, no matter from which angle, he would always maintain a gentlemanly distance from women. At the same time, he seemed to be eager to announce Yun Shishir's identity in order to cut off the feelings that she shouldn't have for him. She sighed again. This man was too smart, too sharp. He seemed to have sensed her feelings that she couldn't let go of. Therefore, when she was full of joy, he smiled and introduced his wife in a gentlemanly manner, as if to draw a line between them. Xian, when you grow up, I'll marry you, okay? Xian, I like you. Let's be together forever. The promise of childhood sweethearts still echoed in her ears. The young man's solemn vow seemed to still ring in her ears. However, more than 10 years had passed, and things had changed. At this moment, there was another unfamiliar woman standing beside him, and it was obvious that he loved her very much. Did he tell this woman about the vow that he had once made to her? Thinking of this, Rong Xian couldn't help but bite her lips hard. Those speculations were like needles piercing into her heart, corroding it to the point where it was almost unbearable. She had chased after him, without a second thought, he already had his own happiness. She couldn't help but hate herself. Why didn't she look for him back then? But at the same time, she was annoyed with him. Why hadn't he come looking for her after so long? If she missed him, would be a lifetime. He couldn't accept it. She suddenly felt very unwilling, but she had no reason to convince herself not to let go. Chapter 25-32. She was not a clingy woman, but when she saw him hugging the woman intimately, she felt as if her heart had been pierced by a knife. In the hotel, the dawn dinner that originally belonged to 2 people was now occupied by 3 people sitting at the table, but each of them had their own thoughts. Mu Yazhou was a little nervous. He glanced at the woman sitting next to him from time to time. He didn't know if she had seen the scene just now. He deliberately introduced her to Rong Xian formally in order to prevent the 2 women from thinking too much. He was also surprised to meet Rong Xian in Italy. He even forgot that there was a girl in the distant country of Italy whom he had loved when he was young. In his innocent youth, he also had a girl who he loved. At that time, his feelings for her were very simple. He liked her and wanted to marry her when he grew up and live happily with her for the rest of his life. It was a beautiful imagination, like a fairy tale. However, this love gradually faded as the memory faded. Compared with the unforgettable memory of him in Rong Xian's mind, his memory of her disappeared with the flight to Italy. Rong Xian sat at the table and cut the steak absent-mindedly. As if to ease the tension, she deliberately put all her attention on the steak. She carefully cut it into neat cubes and finally stuffed it into her mouth silently. At this moment, no matter how delicious the steak was, it was like chewing wax in her mouth. Yun Shishir glanced at her and then at the man next to her. She didn't say anything, but silently cut the steak and tasted it casually. In the long and tense atmosphere, Yun Shishir was the first to break the silence. Honey, aren't you going to introduce her? Hearing her words, Mu Yaja finally came to his senses and looked up. Rong Xian. Have you forgotten? You have just introduced her name. Yun Shishir said again. Is there nothing else worth introducing except her name? This sentence was slightly unfriendly. It could be heard that she was very repulsed by this woman named Rong Xian. It was said that women were extremely sensitive. Yun Shishir was a meticulous person. Even a fool could tell that this woman named Rong Xian was looking at her man in a different way. She clearly had feelings for him. But this kind of adoration was not something she was happy to see. Which woman could tolerate a woman who had feelings for her man sitting at the same table as her? Not even for a moment. Therefore, the moment she opened her mouth, the smell of gunpowder filled the air. Mu Yaja could also tell that Rong Xian's tone was unkind. Just as he was about to speak, Rong Xian smiled and said, I'm sorry, my behavior today was indeed a bit abrupt. However, Zhe and I haven't seen each other for more than 10 years. Now that we've met again, it's hard to suppress the joy in my heart. Please forgive me for offending you. Pausing for a moment, she looked at Mu Yaja and said shyly, I didn't expect to meet my childhood sweetheart. I feel very fortunate and happy. Childhood sweethearts. She didn't like this word at all. Her heart skipped a beat. She was his childhood sweetheart. Chapter 25-33. The woman did not seem to notice the uncomfortable expression on Yun Shishir's face. She smiled faintly and said in a low voice, I'm also a little surprised. I haven't seen you for so many years, and I didn't expect you to be married. Oh, by the way, I still don't know your name. Rong Xian noticed Yun Shishir's unintentional protest. However, this woman had immigrated to Italy at the age of 10 and had grown up in Italy. Therefore, she had adopted the typical straightforwardness of Europeans and did not hide her hostility towards this woman. She asked for her name, but her tone was not polite either. My name is Yun Shishir. Yun Shishir. Does that mean Yun Shan Shishir? Yes. Yun means Yun, and Shir means poetic. Oh. You guessed right. Mu Yaja was a little surprised by her Chinese. She had immigrated to Italy at the age of 10, but she could still speak Chinese fluently and clearly. It was indeed amazing. Rong Xian seemed to understand the doubt in Mu Yaja's eyes and said lightly, Zhe, did you know? I'm working in the embassy now. Is your mother still a diplomat working in the embassy? Yes. She was calm, generous, and elegant. Her speech and manner of conversation were extremely noble, and she had an indescribable temperament. If one had to describe her, one could only say that from her speech and behavior, this woman was obviously from the upper class. Her natural and unrestrained manner made her image seem a little harsh. After all, she was Mu Yaja's wife, and this woman was just her husband's childhood sweetheart. After so many years, it was not inappropriate for them to sit down and have a meal together, reminisce about the past, and tease each other. However, Rong Xian's lack of honesty and unkind words made her seem a little petty. Childhood sweetheart. Yun Shishir suddenly laughed and looked at him. I didn't expect you to have your first awakening of love when you were young. I thought you were like this when you were young, rigid and dull, like a little old man. Ha! Really? Rong Xian was a little surprised. When Zhe was young, he was not as mature and steady as he is now. Although sometimes he was a little dull and gloomy, most of the time. Well, at least when he was with me, he still loved to laugh. When he was young, his eyes were very beautiful, as if there were countless little stars hidden in them, and they were very charming. It was because of his eyes that I fell in love with him. Her straightforwardness and openness made Yun Shishir a little uncomfortable. One Yun Shishir, and Rong Xian's words, Rong Xian's. Rong Xian's, Yun's two's to her. She's s's, sssssss. However, because the narration came from the mouth of a woman, Yun Shishir couldn't help but resist and reject it. While Yun Shishir was silent, she saw Rong Xian looking at Mu Yaja with a smile. At the same time, she seemed to recall the carefree days of her youth through his face. Chapter 25-34. Very big. Mu Yaja put down his knife and fork, took a napkin, and elegantly wiped the traces of tears from the corners of his mouth. He smiled slightly and said, "I still remember how you looked like when you were a child. Your eyes were big and watery, and you were always crying. Whenever you cried, the sky would darken, the earth would change color, your nose would turn red, and your tears wouldn't stop. No matter how I coaxed you, it was useless." After that, he didn't continue. Rong Xian couldn't help but laugh. "Who said that coaxing didn't work? At that time, when you saw me crying, you would try to make me happy. However, you didn't know how to coax girls, and you didn't know how to be opportunistic. When you were at your wit's end, you could only hold me in your arms and coax me gently. I asked you to sing, and you sang obediently. Just like that, I listened and stopped crying. Do you still remember? When you were a child, you didn't sing well. You couldn't even sing properly. You just sang all over the place. I was crying and crying, but I was so amused by you that I forgot to cry." As Rong Xian spoke, a faint glow appeared on her face, and she looked extremely gentle. She was immersed in nostalgia, but the more she thought about it, the more melancholy she felt. Thinking about how the man she used to love was now married, her heart ached again. With such a bad mood, she deliberately wanted to give Yun Shishir a taste of her own medicine. She deliberately led the conversation to the memories of their youth, as if she was deliberately trying to upset her. It was just as she wished. Yun Shishir's appetite was turned upside down by her. She suddenly put aside her knife and fork, lowered her head, and took a napkin to wipe the corners of her mouth silently. Rong Xian's understatement was infinitely magnified. She could tell that Rong Xian was deliberately trying to disgust her. Why was she talking about the past at this time? Could it be that she was deliberately trying to anger her? She had never participated in or known about the youth of the man she loved. In those beautiful memories, there was no her name, only Rong Xian's. So, was she flaunting her prowess to her? Was Rong Xian deliberately making fun of her? Thinking of this, Yun Shishir gently took a sip of the dry red wine. Then, she elegantly curved the corners of her lips and smiled. "That's great. From what you said, I found out that a certain man has such a cute side. Sometimes, when he thought about it, he felt regretful. I did not participate in the memories of his youth, but fortunately, my name will be in his future, and only my name will be in it. Thinking of this, I feel very satisfied." The look on Rong Xian's face suddenly froze for a few seconds. She looked at him deeply and said with a faint smile, "Shishir, do you know? I really envy you. I can see that Brother Zhe is deeply in love with you, but there are some things that can't be envied. However, I feel that the more blissful it is, the shorter it is. Therefore, the more blissful it is, the more we have to seize every moment. If you are not careful, happiness will fly away from your hands as if it has grown wings. Therefore, the more blissful you are, the more you must know how to grasp it." "Of course I understand that." Yun Shishir smiled faintly. Rong Xian then sighed. Things have changed with the passage of time. As soon as she finished speaking, a weak voice suddenly sounded. Chapter 25-35. "Daddy. I'm hungry." Rong Xian froze for a moment and looked in the direction of the voice. She saw a little boy in a shirt open the door and walk out of the room, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Yu was awakened by hunger. When he opened his eyes, he saw Xiao Yichen sleeping soundly with his limbs spread out. He rubbed his small belly and decided to leave Xiao Yichen alone and get up to look for food. As soon as he put on his clothes, Yu vaguely heard someone talking outside the door. When he heard Yun Shishir's voice, he immediately opened the door and went out. However, as soon as he walked into the dining room, he saw 3 people sitting at the table. One of them was a brown-haired woman, who was beautiful but unfamiliar. Yu couldn't help but be stunned. She was probably a friend of his parents. He thought to himself, then ignored her and ran over to Yun Shishir to ask for a hug. Yun Shishir sat him on her lap and asked curiously, "Mommy, what time is it now?" "It's past 7:00 in the evening." Did I sleep for so long? I guess I won't be able to sleep again tonight." Woo. Yun Shishir's gloomy mood was instantly dispelled. She couldn't help but gently pinch his little face and say unhappily, "I should have woken you up earlier. I shouldn't have let you sleep for so long. Otherwise, you'll be full of energy and won't be able to sleep at night." Rong Xian's eyes were wide open from the beginning to the end. For a moment, she couldn't digest the child's identity well. Just now, when she saw the child running out of the room, that extremely handsome little face fell into her eyes, and she was a little surprised at once. She saw the little boy's small pink face, a pair of big black and bright eyes, a small nose, a pink mouth, and snow-white teeth. When he smiled, small dimples appeared on his cheeks. He was unbelievably cute. His delicate little face was unbelievably fair, as if it was carved out of jade. It made people want to reach out and touch it personally to be sure that the child was alive and not a work of art. The expression on the little boy's white and lovely face was lovely and charming. He was like a polite little gentleman, and when he smiled, it was as if his heart was about to melt. What surprised her even more was that almost at the first sight of the child, Rong Xian immediately realized that the child must be Mu Yaja's child. If he kept a straight face, he would look exactly like Mu Yaja in his younger days. She could only imagine how handsome and cool he would be when he grew up. His looks would be earth-shattering. But, this cute side of the child's face, and, when he glanced, he gave out a cold zzz's eyes. However, when he turned his head to look at Yun Shishir, his expression instantly changed. An obedient and adorable smile appeared on his face again. His lips curled up to reveal his pearly white teeth as he called out to her in a childish voice. It was simply enough to make one's heart melt a little. She was so envious. If she could have such a cute child, she would be willing to exchange her precious youth for it. Was this his child with her? He was already so big. But, if she remembered correctly, he was only 29 years old, and this child looked about 6 or 7 years old. Could it be that he got married at the age of 12?